Leo watched Ophelia, who was muttering to herself incessantly, looking like she'd been completely possessed. His expression filled with worry. "Are you okay? Have I not been sleeping well lately?" Her face was unnaturally pale, her eyes laced with a web of red veins. She looked like someone who'd been pulling all-nighters for a week straight. But Leo knew her current state was likely due to something more sinister: backlash, creating a dreamland's simulation that was nearly indistinguishable from reality. The price for such an ability couldn't be small. Leo sensed she was gradually succumbing to the corruption and madness that was the inevitable fate of those who wielded such power. She was too obsessive. Even for someone from a bloodline favored by an old god, she couldn't abuse her power like this. Besides, the power of the Dreamlands didn't truly belong to her. Just thinking about the gruesome, flesh-and-blood truth behind that dream was enough to know that this strange power, originating from an ancient deity, was not something to be trifled with. I'm fine." Hearing Leo's concern, Ophelia's eyes finally settled for a moment. But she still clung to his hand, unwilling to let go even slightly. "You should go back and rest," Leo urged patiently. "Stop worrying about official matters. Your health is what's most important. Let's just end all of this," he said. He never expected that after he said this, Ophelia would snap her head up. "It can't end. It will never end," she declared, then began muttering to herself again, a manic look in her eyes. "I'm going to succeed. I'm so close to succeeding." She was so close. She had almost done it. And yet, when Ophelia thought of that cold, lifeless body, Leo's body, her heart sank once more. What went wrong? Where was the mistake? Her bloodshot eyes instinctively flickered toward Leo's face, but she couldn't meet his gaze. The moment she saw his eyes, waves of regret and self-blame would wash over her. And that other thought, the one that haunted her like a ghost. The poor bird in the metal cage, battering itself bloody against the bars. It was all because of her. She had killed Leo. She had killed Leo. The thought plagued her, driving her to the brink of insanity. Overwhelmed by emotion, Ophelia felt the world spin around her, and her body began to sway. "Your Highness!" Carolyn, the head maid, heard the commotion from outside and rushed in, steadying Ophelia in a panic. "Are you all right?" Ophelia seemed lost in her own world, completely deaf to Carolyn's worried voice. I know what the problem is," she suddenly exclaimed, her voice filled with manic excitement. I wasn't wrong. It's just a few parameters that are off. It only needs a few minor adjustments." She immediately pulled away from Carolyn's support and threw open the door, her figure stumbling as it disappeared down the long corridor. The head maid watched her go with a worried expression. A heavy silence fell over the room. Then Carolyn's gaze slowly shifted to Leo, her eyes now filled with open hostility. "Talk. Was this you doing?" Leo feigned confusion. "My doing? What are you talking about?" "Drop the act. It had to be you." Carolyn's voice grew angrier. "You monster. What have you done to Her Highness? What did you do?" Leo frowned slightly. "Are you kidding me? What could I possibly do to Ophelia?" Carolyn remained unconvinced. She clenched her fists, an aura of chilling, killing intent radiating from her as she closed the distance between them. "Don't think for a second that I won't touch you. Killing you would be laughably easy for me." Faced with Carolyn's threat, Leo just shrugged, his expression still calm. "If you don't believe me, there's nothing I can do. It has to be you." Carolyn stared daggers at him. "She was perfectly fine a few days ago, but ever since that day, she ran into your room crying. She's been like a completely different person. What did you do to her? It had to be something Leo did. Otherwise, a woman with the princess's iron would never have ended up in this state." Staring at the man before her, Carolyn's eyes were full of undisguised murderous intent. If it weren't for the fact that this man was so important to Her Highness, she would have already killed him. She wouldn't be standing here wasting a single breath on him. Seeing her blatant hostility, Leo let out a cold laugh. "Do something to her. You do realize I live under your constant watch, right? My every move is monitored by you people. How could I possibly have the opportunity to do anything?" he said, a mocking smile playing on his lips. "I think it's the other way around. If anyone's suspicious here, it's you, isn't it?" "Me?" Carolyn said coldly. "What does this have to do with me?" Leo fixed his gaze on her. "Ophelia told me she had a nightmare that day. She was terrified by what she saw in her dream." He narrowed his eyes, his gaze turning accusatory. "Who here is the expert on sleep and dreams? Only you, right? In fact, I've been meaning to ask you, why is it that the longer I stay here, the harder it is for me to fall asleep? Sometimes I even need your help just to get a few hours of rest." Carolyn froze on the spot. Leo had suddenly flipped the script, interrogating her with a sharp voice. Ms. Carolyn, what exactly have you been doing to us? Why are both she and I experiencing such similar symptoms? She opened her mouth, trying to explain. That's not the same thing. It's not my fault. It's because. But she quickly shut her mouth. She could absolutely not reveal that Her Highness was the one orchestrating all of this. But now, to her embarrassment, she realized she had no way to explain it. The only reason either of them could sleep peacefully was because of her intervention. Not only did she have to forcibly hypnotize Leo, but Her Highness. Due to her long-term manipulation of the dreamlands, she had long since lost the ability to sleep naturally. Most of the time, she required Carolyn's help just to drift off. Seeing Carolyn back down, Leo's smile deepened. What? Did I hit the nail on the head? Your little scheme is exposed, so now you're speechless? How dare you? Carolyn snapped, furious. You're the one twisting the truth and stirring up trouble. Say what you will, Leo said, crossing his arms. Now that I've exposed you for what you are, if you wicked servant, try to cause any more trouble, don't blame me and Ophelia for not being so polite. Carolyn was so enraged she couldn't stand to be in the room a second longer. She shot Leo a cold glare and turned to leave. After all these days together, it felt like only now was she truly seeing what a vile person Leo really was. Leo walked to the door, a smile on his face as he watched her retreating back. Headmaid, even if you won't admit it, I hope you remember this. The state Ophelia is in today. A good part of that is thanks to you. Shouldn't you reflect on all the dirty work you've done? Carolyn's back trembled violently. After a soft knock, Carolyn gently pushed open the door to the office. The scene that greeted her made her skin crawl. The room was littered with manuscripts covered in dense, frantic script. They blanketed nearly every visible surface. The writing on the pages was twisted and crazed, like terrible incantations for opening a gate to hell. Ophelia, her face contorted and hair a mess, was sprawled on the floor without a shred of her usual poise, furiously scribbling on sheet after sheet of white paper. She worked with astonishing speed, her hands producing the jinx-like text and esoteric, barely decipherable symbols. The atmosphere in the room was unnervingly grim and oppressive. Carolyn glanced around fearfully, feeling as though another, unspeakable presence was secretly watching her from the shadows. That was the source of the strange, ominous feeling that made her hair stand on end. Your Highness, breakfast is ready. You should, Carolyn began, cautiously approaching. Don't come in. Ophelia lifted a pair of dark crimson eyes, her voice hoarse and commanding. Don't step on my schematics. Of course, Your Highness. Carolyn quickly replied. Let me bring your breakfast in. You should eat something. She watched Ophelia's frenzied movements with concern, but her princess had already fallen silent, seemingly lost in her own world once more. The dutiful head maid gently closed the door. A moment later, she returned, placing the breakfast tray on a table. Your Highness. Carolyn took a deep breath, steeling herself. Please stop this. The way you are now. You're frightening me. Stop. You can't go any deeper into the dreamlands. It's not a good place. The backlash will destroy you. Shut up. Ophelia shot her an impatient glare. It was only for a second, but that cold, hard look sent a chill down the head-maid's spine. She had never seen such an expression on Her Highness's face, nor such manic behavior. Why had she become like this? Was it because of Leo? Carolyn was utterly baffled, finding it hard to believe. In her mind, the princess had always been confident and composed. She possessed a ruthlessness and tactical mind far beyond her years. Carolyn had even once believed that of all the Emperor's children, Princess Ophelia was the one most suited to be heir. Ever since she and the Shadow Guards had been assigned to the princess by the Emperor 4 years ago, they had been assisting her with various tasks, all of them exceedingly difficult, as if the Emperor were deliberately testing her. The princess had briefly taken charge of the leaderless Bureau of Special Investigations. Faced with her decisive actions and formidable talent, even the most notorious hard cases in the Bureau were brought to heel. In just a few months, the anomalous entities plaguing the city were wiped out, and public safety improved dramatically. The Emperor had also tasked her with handling a rebellious territory on the Empire's frontier. The Third Prince, and many other enemies, had watched from the shadows, expecting her to fail. And yet, that territory was now her personal fiefdom, an honor that even her older brothers, who had entered the court years before her, had never enjoyed. All of this was a testament to the princess's capabilities. But now, that same brilliant woman had been reduced to this obsessed wreck. all for a man. Watching the princess mutter to herself as she scribbled endlessly, the head maid let out a deep sigh. She had thought that all of Her Highness's careful planning and power-grabbing over the past 4 years were for some unspoken, grand ambition. Yet now, she was trapped by something so trivial. For a man, it was ridiculous. Once Her Highness defeated that violent and treacherous third prince and the powerful second prince, what kind of man couldn't she have? Every handsome man in the nation would be hers for the choosing. Carolyn desperately wanted to voice these thoughts, but she hesitated. When she finally opened her mouth, she stammered, "Your Highness, Mr. Sterling, Leo." The only response from the room was the hoarse, repetitive muttering. Seeing the princess in this possessed state, Carolyn could no longer hold back. "Your Highness, he seems to know about our plan. The way you are now, it's very likely his fault. That devious man must have done something to you in the Dreamlands." Ophelia remained lost in her own world, paying her no mind. Seeing this, Carolyn's voice grew louder. "Your Highness, you can't go on like this. It's not worth destroying yourself over Leo. What's so great about him anyway?" In that instant, the room fell dead silent. Ophelia slowly lifted her head. It seemed she had actually heard her. "Your Highness." Carolyn felt a flicker of hope. But what happened next filled her with terror. The princess seemed to be suppressing some powerful emotion, her whole body trembling violently. At the same time, tiny black scales began to emerge from her skin. The red eyes fixed on Carolyn suddenly transformed into vertical slits. Those inhuman pupils now glinted with a strange light. Carolyn's blood ran cold. She had the sudden hallucination that she was being stared down by some demon from a black abyss. It was utterly terrifying. A shiver ran down her spine, and she didn't dare say another word. She felt a pang of regret. Perhaps she had truly overstepped her bounds. But thankfully, in the end, Ophelia managed to rein in her emotions. The fine black scales gradually receded, and her pupils returned to normal. She looked at Carolyn and said softly, her voice devoid of emotion, "Get out." "Yes." Carolyn quickly bowed her head, not daring to meet her eyes again. She fled the oppressive office, as if escaping for her life. A long time later, a barely audible sigh echoed through the room. "You people don't understand." The reason she had suppressed all her smiles for the past 4 years, doing things she despised. It wasn't for power. She just wanted to no longer be controlled by others, to be free to do whatever she wanted. That was all. At that moment, the smiling face of a young man slowly materialized in her mind. Ophelia thought of that quiet country estate again. She remembered the afternoon that mysterious boy had snuck her out. A world without him was meaningless. "I will get everything I want." Back in the Dreamlands, Leo stared out at the bustling, vibrant city of New Haven and fell into deep thought. He couldn't see any changes from the last time. Perhaps it was more realistic and complex now, or maybe it had expanded in size. But for Leo, it was all still useless. Ophelia's obsessive plan, now that he had seen through it and even managed to counter it, was backfiring. The harder she tried, the more she was just tormenting herself. Leo looked at the cityscape of towering buildings and streams of traffic and gave a wry, internal smile. Hadn't Ophelia realized that a place like this was far better for a suicide than a country manor? Compared to hanging himself from a tree branch, this place offered an endless variety of ways to die. Was her increasingly fragile mind really prepared for what was coming next? After all, in this world, nobody knew how to die better than he did. "Let's end this with a bang," he thought. The meaningless Dreamlands version of New Haven was as busy and noisy as ever. Leo and Ophelia walked hand in hand down a bustling pedestrian street. He had no idea how long he and Ophelia had been living in this dream city. Over that vast stretch of time, if he hadn't been constantly reminding himself that this was a dream, not reality, he probably would have lost himself long ago. Leo glanced silently at Ophelia beside him. She was getting more patient. Despite her repeated failures, she seemed unwilling to give up. This time, however, she was being far more cautious. It was like boiling a frog in slowly warming water. The street was thronged with people, the air filled with the cries of vendors and the delicious aroma of street food. It seemed they had never actually visited a place like this in the real world, but in the Dreamlands, they were regulars. As they walked, Ophelia suddenly stopped. "Wait!" She stood before a stall selling ice cream cones, her face full of interest as she examined the novel, colorful treats. "Want one?" she asked, turning back to him with a radiant smile. Leo looked at her and nodded. Ophelia bought one for herself and one for Leo. It doesn't taste as good as I imagined. Ophelia took a bite, a little disappointed. She had no idea what it was actually supposed to taste like. Her station in life made it difficult to eat street food. She had just thought a street like this ought to have something like it when she designed the simulation. At that thought, she glanced nervously at Leo, afraid he would spot the flaw. She shouldn't have brought him to get this. Seeing him calmly take a bite, Ophelia asked quietly, "Do you think it's good?" Leo smiled. "It's actually pretty good." "Really?" Ophelia's eyes lit up. "Really?" Leo took another big bite, finishing the cone. Ophelia laughed happily. "If you like it, we can come here every day. We can eat this every day. When I get back, I have to make Carolyn and the others buy me a real ice cream cone to see what it tastes like." "Okay, every day," Leo agreed without a second thought. Ophelia finally let out a sigh of relief. She had made extensive preparations for this attempt. Though she appeared normal in the dreamlands, in reality, she hadn't slept for several days and nights straight. When she had gone to find Carolyn again, her horrifying appearance had given the head made a terrible shock. But she didn't regret it all. Compared to the beautiful future she was about to achieve, her current suffering was nothing. The progress was slow, but this time she was really going to succeed. This version of Leo had spent so much time with her without showing any of the abnormal reactions from the previous two attempts. This gave Ophelia a glimmer of hope. At that thought, her smile grew even wider with excitement. "If you like it, I'll go get you another one." She eagerly returned to the stall. Then, when she returned to the corner of the street holding 2 ice cream cones, she was horrified to find that Leo had vanished. "Leo, where? Where did you go?" She looked around nervously. When her eyes fell upon the street teeming with traffic, she froze. Her blood turned to ice. She saw the one thing she never wanted to see again. Leo, who had been perfectly fine just moments ago, suddenly looked like his soul had left his body. He was walking like a zombie, shambling aimlessly into the dangerous road. Every car that sped past made her heart pound her chest. "Leo, stop! Wait!" Ophelia ran like a madwoman toward him. But it was too late. The street erupted with a violent screech of brakes and the deafening blast of a horn. Finally, there was a tremendous crash. Leo's body flew through the air like a kite with its string cut. Ophelia heard the sickening sound of breaking bones as a spray of warm, crimson blood splattered across her face. The cold ice cream cones fell to the ground, slowly melting into a puddle. Ophelia, her face covered in blood, stared in disbelief at the scene before her, at Leo's lifeless body. "It happened again. You promised me. Why did you still have to die?" A heart-wrenching, desperate scream echoed through the chaotic street. Back at the estate, Leo shot awake in bed. As he suddenly awoke, a flurry of chaotic sounds erupted in the room. He realized he wasn't in his own bedroom, but in a dark room with the curtains drawn tight. Several maids, Ophelia's trusted staff, were gathered around him, staring at him nervously. Leo turned his head. His bed was connected to Ophelia's. At that moment, Ophelia, looking utterly exhausted, had also woken up. Her blood-red eyes were fixed on Carolyn. "Continue. Don't stop," she commanded coldly, not even glancing at Leo. "Yes, Your Highness," Carolyn replied immediately. Leo watched everything with cold detachment. Carolyn walked toward him expressionlessly. This time, she wasn't holding a swaying pocket watch or any pills. She was holding a syringe. The maids immediately pinned Leo's body down. Then the cold, thick needle was plunged into his vein. Leo didn't struggle much. He just looked calmly at Ophelia's face. The moment their eyes met, she quickly looked away, her gaze filled with guilt. "Do you know what you're doing?" The drug acted so quickly that Leo found it difficult to even speak. Ophelia kept her head down, silent. Leo sighed helplessly. By doing this, she was burning all her bridges. She was dead set on changing him in the Dreamlands. She was going to see this through to the bitter end. Just a moment later, Leo's eyes closed heavily. He had lost consciousness. "Now me," Ophelia commanded. "Your Highness." Carolyn's expression was fraught with worry. "I suggest you use a gentler method to induce sleep." Her Highness was almost completely unable to sleep naturally anymore. If this continued, what would happen in the future? As her head maid, she couldn't bear to imagine the consequences. However, the only response she received was a resolute and icy stare. Carolyn sighed internally. She could only walk over and use the same method to put Ophelia to sleep. He entered the Dreamlands again. It was still the same bustling, steam-powered metropolis. Time flowed by unnoticed, and familiar scenes replayed themselves. The Ophelia by his side constantly changed the script. Sometimes she was his classmate, sometimes his neighbor, sometimes even a co-worker after graduation. As all these different versions of herself, she would still have a chance encounter with him. But the ending was always different. After all, in a city like this, deliberately seeking death was all too easy. Sometimes he would suddenly snap and slit his wrists right in front of her. Sometimes he would become a deranged lunatic, running wild in the streets until the police arrived and gunned him down. Of course, the one that left the deepest, most unforgettable impression on Ophelia was the last time. On the roof, a towering skyscraper. As Ophelia watched, Leo leaped. She saw it all, her eyes wide with horror. He died right in front of her, less than 10 feet away. Crimson blood and white brain matter splattered everywhere. The mangled remains on the ground were barely recognizable as a human body. Ophelia stared blankly at the scene, her mind a complete void. When fear reaches its absolute peak, even the will to think vanishes. She stood there in a daze, just staring at the shattered pieces of Leo's body. Time flowed on around her. Day turned to night, night to day. The buildings crumbled. The dream collapsed. Ophelia's eyes opened sluggishly. She sat up in bed, stiffly like a soulless doll. When she saw Leo in the adjacent bed, her gaze flickered for a moment. He was alive, but he would die again. Your Highness, Carolyn approached with concern. Although Carolyn was standing right in front of her, Ophelia didn't seem to see her. She was in a daze, her mind somewhere else entirely. Ophelia, Leo fought against the exhaustion weighing down his body and struggled toward her. Stop this. It's meaningless, he said, sighing as he looked at her. Do you have to keep ramming your head against a wall until you're bloody? Can't we just talk to each other? To his surprise, Ophelia suddenly started laughing. A wild, hysterical laugh. It was a laugh of despair and madness. How could it be over? It will never be over. What do you mean, meaningless? This is meaningful, she repeated, as if trying to convince herself. Then, she fixed her gaze on Leo's face, her pupils instantly constricting into vertical slits, like those of a cold-blooded reptile. I haven't lost. I've won. I'll prove it to you. As she finished speaking, a layer of fine black scales spread across her pale skin, quickly covering half her body. To the maid's shock, her body continued to transform. Sharp horns sprouted from her head, and a pair of enormous black wings unfurled from her back. After her transformation, an immense, oppressive pressure descended upon everyone in the room. A chilling aura spread out, making their bodies grow cold and tremble. Carolyn retreated nervously. It's a dragon. Her Highness is of draconic lineage. According to legend, the imperial family were descendants of a dragon god, a noble and sacred draconic lineage. But Leo, looking at the increasingly terrifying figure, shook his head. No, not a dragon. As he said this, Ophelia's wings suddenly spread wide. She took flight. Everywhere she went, she brought a corrosive black mist. The bed and cabinets quickly dissolved into pools of black liquid. How is that like a dragon? It was more like a black demon straight from hell. Ophelia vanished from the room. Then, the entire massive estate began to tremble. The maids looked around in shock as objects, large and small, began to float slowly into the air, as if gravity had ceased to exist. Leo frowned and looked out the window. He saw all sorts of bizarre, grotesque things appearing in the real world. After Ophelia's sudden disappearance, the tremors shaking the estate grew more violent, and alongside them, other strange, unexpected changes began to occur. Objects floated into the air, the sky outside grew darker and darker, and a bizarre, rhythmic squelching, like the writhing of flesh, echoed through the halls. What's happening? What's going on? The maids cried out in panic. Where is Her Highness? Several black-clad shadow guards suddenly appeared in the room. Their usually grim, serious faces were now masks of confusion. I don't know where Her Highness went either, Carolyn said, then pointed out the window in even greater shock. Look, the sun. It's gone. Outside the estate, the entire sky had turned a murky gray, as if the world had plunged into an unnatural night. The maids and shadow guards stared in disbelief. How is this possible? The lead shadow guard muttered to himself. This shouldn't be possible. How could Her Highness possess this kind of power? Carolyn stared in shock at her surroundings. In the 4 years she had served the princess, she had never seen anything like this. The entire world seemed to have gone strange. An unwelcome thought surfaced in her mind, a rumor about the 5th princess that was spoken of only in hushed, fearful tones within the palace. She is the embodiment of misfortune. On the day of her birth, strange omens appeared in the sky. She will bring ruin and destruction to the Empire. Carolyn had always dismissed it as baseless gossip. Her princess was exceptionally talented, yes, but she was just a young woman. How could she possibly shake the foundations of a vast empire? But today, she felt as if she were seeing the princess's true face for the first time, seeing the power she had always deliberately concealed, a power that struck fear into the hearts of all who witnessed it. As the others panicked, Leo, who had been silent until now, finally spoke. "This isn't reality," he said slowly. The maids and shadow guards all turned to him. As the person who knew Ophelia best, Leo had been carefully observing the changes around them. Or rather, it's not entirely reality. He left the room and walked down the corridor staircase. With every step, the wooden floorboards under his feet made a sound they shouldn't have, like stepping on soft, disgusting minced flesh. It was terrifyingly similar to the truth of the dreamlands he had glimpsed with his eye of insight the first time he'd reloaded a save. The dark, horrifying things from the dreamlands were bleeding into reality. "Mr. Sterling, wait." The lead shadow guard and Carolyn hurried after him, still faithfully carrying out their duties. "Where's Her Highness now? We have to find her quickly." Leo looked at the anxious Carolyn and shook his head helplessly. "If my theory is correct, and the dream is indeed invading reality, then we won't find her easily, because she is everywhere." "What?" Carolyn was stunned. Leo had reached the main hall. He frowned at the sight. Writhing blood vessels, like spreading spiderwebs or mold, grew wantonly across the walls. The estate was looking more and more like that hell of flesh and blood from the dreamlands. At the same time, an unnerving feeling of being watched, one that raised goosebumps on his skin, followed his every move. In this domain, Ophelia's will was omnipresent. She had to be watching him. "Then what should we do?" Carolyn asked, grabbing Leo's arm anxiously. "Mr. Sterling, I admit I've done some unpleasant to you in the past, but Her Highness means you no harm. Everything she's done for you. Please forgive her." Leo looked calmly at the dedicated headmaid. Her expression grew more and more frantic. "You're the one who understands her best. Please think of something. Can you make Her Highness stop? This can't go on. If the Emperor's people find out." Her Highness had only just managed to convince the old Emperor that she was no longer a threat. He had even granted her a small measure of power. If she continued like this, if she caused another disaster, she would certainly not be let off so easily in the future. "I know," Leo sighed softly. The power of the dreamlands was continuously expanding outwards. Leo looked past the estate's main gate. He didn't know how far the domain had spread, but he could already hear panic screams from outside. Under the dark sky, the area beyond the estate was in chaos. Many servants were screaming and running back toward the manor, pursued by numerous grotesque, terrifying figures. They had bloated, rotting bodies, extremely long, sharp claws, and mouths full of jagged fangs dripping with a black, viscous fluid. Ghouls. Drawn by the dreamlands, they were faithful followers of the old god Nodens, a particularly troublesome type of anomalous monster. The moment the ghouls appeared, the shadow guards sprang into action. They vanished from where they stood, reappearing like shadows at all the key entry points to the estate. This clearly wasn't the first time the shadow guards had faced these creatures. They used their superior speed to their advantage, rendering the ghouls' brute strength useless. The monster's sharp claws and fangs swiped at empty air every time. The sounds of gunshots and blades slicing through flesh filled the air. Amidst roars and snarls, one ghoul head after another hit the ground. But it wasn't enough. Leo looked outside again. More and more ghouls were appearing. Even the maids joined the fight, each displaying their own unique skills. Leo saw Carolyn beside him begin to chant a long, arcane incantation. A moment later, the head of a ghoul charging at her exploded, sending a foul, rotten stench washing over them. Another maid's muscles began to bulge, ripping her uniform to shreds. Leo watched as she transformed into a 7-foot-tall mountain of muscle and roared as she charged into the horde of ghouls. All the estate's servants were trapped in the main hall, while the combat staff fought relentlessly against the ghouls. Yet, the number of ghouls didn't decrease. Instead, it grew larger and larger. Finally, a ghoul broke through the defensive line and charged straight for the panicked crowd. Susan, a master of the culinary arts but completely useless in a fight, screamed at the top of her lungs. Just as the black slick fangs were about to bite down, a sharp crimson blur intercepted it. Leo stood in front of Susan, his crimson edge having sliced off the ghoul's massive head. Carolyn rushed over anxiously. There are more and more ghouls. Sir Shadow Guard, what should we do? Before the guard could answer, Leo spoke up. As long as the dreamlands don't collapse, their numbers will only increase. Then what do we do? Susan the cook covered her mouth, sobbing with fear. Are we going to die here? I don't want to die. Leo looked at the chaotic crowd and shouted, Get out of here. Otherwise, you're just waiting to die. There are even more ghouls outside, the Shadow Guard disagreed. If we hold our ground here, we can wait for reinforcements, or for Her Highness to regain her senses. By the time it happens, you'll be a corpse. Leo shot him a look, then turned to Carolyn. Right now, get everyone out of the estate. Get outside. Escape the range of the dreamlands. But Carolyn hesitated. Leo said immediately, Don't worry about the ghouls. They're not after you. It's not that. Carolyn shook her head frantically. What about Her Highness? Are we just going to abandon her? This was the main reason why she and the Shadow Guards were unwilling to leave. Who said anything about abandoning her? Leo looked at her reassuringly. Don't worry. I'm staying here. You're staying here. Carolyn looked at him, exasperated. I know you're important to Her Highness, Mr. Sterling. Maybe she'll listen to you, but can you handle that many ghouls? Leo glanced at the ever-increasing tide of ghouls pouring into the estate and smiled confidently. You don't need to worry about that. I have my ways. Seeing her and the Shadow Guard still hesitating, Leo's expression turned cold. What are you standing around for? Go. Now. The best way you can help me right now is to not get in my way. All right. Carolyn exchanged a look with the Shadow Guard and finally stopped hesitating. Under the cover of the Shadow Guards, the estate's servants began an orderly escape through a side gate. Just before leaving, the head maid looked back, her eyes still filled with worry. Mr. Sterling, don't worry, Leo said calmly. I'll end this. This started at the estate, and it will end at the estate. I'll give you back your normal princess. After all the servants had evacuated, the vast main hall of the estate was left with only Leo and the ever-growing swarm of ghouls. Leo kept his eyes fixed on the ghouls' movements and then pushed off with his feet. With an agility score close to 50, he moved as if his soles were greased. While he didn't have the phantom-like, reality-defying speed of the Shadow Guards, it was more than enough for his current needs. A blood-red shadow flickered through the estate. Leo used his blood magic to cut down any ghoul that tried to block his path, carving a path through the horde. The ghouls pursued him relentlessly, a black mass of bodies quickly forming behind him. Leo led them on, dashing toward the kitchen area on the first floor. His long-term plan was finally coming to fruition. He searched the kitchen for the massive steam boiler. Every time he had offered to cook for Ophelia, he had secretly engaged in a little sabotage. The Magitech devices in the kitchen, the huge steam boiler that heated the estate. He hadn't spared a single piece of equipment that used Ethereum crystals. He would crank up the power, then dial it down, mess with the settings, and run them at overload. The Magitech equipment was on the verge of breaking down. It was a miracle it had lasted this long. His original idea was to link this to the infamous airship bombing that had rocked the capital, hoping to attract attention. An incident of that magnitude would be something that even Ophelia, as the fifth princess, couldn't cover up. He never expected it would serve another purpose. It was a win-win. Leo quickly fiddled with the steam boiler's controls, cranking the Ethereum crystal-powered facility to its maximum output. As if that wasn't enough, he piled up all the Ethereum crystals he had pried off other devices. Hearing the boiler rumble and shake, and seeing the floor littered with faintly glowing blue Ethereum crystals, Leo's heart pounded in his chest. The terrifying scene he and Helena had witnessed that day was still fresh in his mind. Shit, did I use too many? Am I going to blow myself up too? But there was no time to second-guess himself. The kitchen was filling up with ghouls, blocking his exit. If he didn't run now, it would be too late. Leo vaulted through a window, shot out of the estate, and sprinted toward the back garden without looking back. 1 second, 2 seconds, 3 seconds, 10 seconds. Just as Leo was gritting his teeth, pushing his exhausted body forward, a brilliant blue light erupted behind him. It was immediately followed by a shockwave. The immense magical energy released by the out-of-control Ethereum crystals shattered every window in the estate. Even from 100 yards away, Leo could feel the force of the blast against the back of his head. He dove onto the garden lawn, and even with his ears covered, the deafening explosion left him with a temporary ringing. He looked back, his heart pounding with fear. The elegant estate in the southern suburbs had been leveled in the blast. Countless bricks and tiles were sent flying into the air. An exceptionally foul, barbecue-like smell wafted over on the wind. Leo stared at the sight of the estate. Amidst the rubble, a massive fire raged. There was no longer any sign of the ghouls. He let out a sigh of relief. The force of the explosion left his chest tight and breathless. His body was covered in bleeding cuts and scrapes. He was a mess. He sat on the ground, looking at the ruins with a wry smile. The sky didn't seem quite as dark anymore. He could vaguely make out the scenery in the distance. It seemed the invasion of the Dreamlands hadn't spread too far. "Ophelia, you're watching, aren't you?" Leo said to the sky with a bitter smile. He didn't know where she was, but that faint sense of being watched had never disappeared. What's the point of doing this? You can't seriously think you can make your power, your Dreamlands, interfere with reality, can you? You're incredible, but you're underestimating this world. Even just in the city, there are masters everywhere. You failed. No. Ophelia's hoarse voice suddenly echoed through the air. I have not failed. I have not failed, she roared defiantly, her voice startlingly close. Leo looked toward a patch of withered flower beds. In a dream, this place had been an endless, beautiful sea of flowers. But in reality, it wasn't yet the season for them to bloom. That beautiful scene had been nothing but an illusion. Ophelia's figure appeared in the flower bed, sitting cross-legged on the ground, motionless. It turned out she had been hiding here all along. In her current state, she was half-human, half-monstrous anomaly. A corrosive black mist swirled around her. The moment the black mist touched the garden's budding plants, they all withered and died, dissolving into rotten black sludge. I haven't lost. I haven't lost, she repeated, her voice a crazed, obsessive mantra. As long as I merge the two worlds, then, reality will become illusion, and illusion will become reality. In my domain, anything is possible, until the Dreamlands have consumed every corner of the world. She laughed, a twisted, insane sound. Then, I can do whatever I want. I will be the master of everything, and the world will become my cage. And you, her crimson eyes locked on Leo's face. You will never escape my world I want. A world I want. Meaning it all. As she spoke, blackness once again began to swallow the visible world. The visible world. Leo stared into those crazed, blood-red eyes. Ophelia race. Human, night-gaunt kin of the old god's affinity. 100 corruption level. 100. He got his feet. As he stood, an unprecedented psychic assault slammed into his mind. Leo's body swayed. He gritted his teeth, fighting against the impact with all his might. Then, stiffly, he began to walk, one step at a time, toward Ophelia. "Stay back," she shrieked. "Don't come any closer." "What are you afraid of?" Leo smiled bitterly. "In my current state, am I really any threat to you?" Leo clenched his jaw and continued his difficult walk toward Ophelia. He stepped into the dense black mist. The mist immediately began to eat away at his skin. A searing, piercing pain shot through his entire body. His exposed arms started to turn black. His hair began to curl and shrivel as if burned, then melted away. All the unhealed wounds on his body started to fester, oozing a thick, black blood. By the time his entire body was submerged in the black mist, his wounds were so deep you could see bone. It was so painful, an unbearable agony of burning, tearing, and corrosion, like being trapped in the eternal flames of hell. Leo's eyes were bloodshot. He could no longer see the world around him clearly. "Don't come any closer." Ophelia's panicked voice was now tinged with a sob. "You'll die. You'll definitely die. Stay away from me. Damn it, just maintaining this domain is my limit. I've overextended my power so much, I can't even move. Unless I voluntarily end all of this. But I'll never do that." Hearing Ophelia's panic screams, Leo continued to trudge forward as if he hadn't heard a thing. It was only a dozen yards, but it felt as long as crossing an entire world. Gradually, his body hunched over like that of a shuffling old man. But still, he moved forward, steadily, one step after another. "You're insane. You're completely insane," Ophelia screamed. "Don't you feel pain? Aren't you afraid of death?" The last shred of her sanity seemed to snap at the sight of Leo's actions. Finally, the encroaching blackness of the sky halted its spread. The world began to return to normal. Ophelia watched, terrified, as Leo, looking like he had just walked out of hell, took one step after another toward her. She had finally stopped the Dreamland's invasion of reality. The black mist in the flower bed thinned out dramatically. Leo smiled bitterly, letting out a sigh of relief. Looking at the now-closed Ophelia, at her tear-streaked, terrified, trembling face, he gently pulled her into an embrace. Feeling Leo's embrace, not strong, but frail, Ophelia broke into sobs. "Why are you so stupid? Are you crazy? she wailed, clinging to him tightly. After everything I did to you, you just walked right up to me. Is there something wrong with you? Leo struggled to lift his head, a weak smile on his face. I probably do have something wrong with me. Otherwise, I wouldn't be trying to change you. Yandra. Every slight movement sent needles of pain through his skin. The corrosive black mist was so potent that not an inch of his skin was left unscathed. Even the smile he wore now was a monumental effort. Seeing him like this, Ophelia's heart ached. She quickly cupped his face in her hands. Does it hurt? Leo managed a weak shake of his head. No, this won't do. Ophelia's voice grew frantic. You'll die like this. I'll take you to a doctor right now. Carolyn, where are you people? Where did you all go? She looked anxiously toward the ruins of the estate, then into the distance. After the explosion, the maids and shadow guards who had fled had reappeared in the distance. They were now hurrying back toward Leo and Ophelia. Don't worry, Leo soothed her with a smile. I won't die. I told you, didn't I? I have 9 lives. Before Ophelia could respond, Leo was racked by a violent coughing fit, spitting up a mouthful of thick black blood. This is no time for jokes, Ophelia cried, quickly supporting Leo's swaying body. Leo's condition was deteriorating rapidly. He had severe burns all over, his wounds were festering, and he had likely inhaled the black mist, his lungs now probably corrupted as well. Seeing him grow weaker, Ophelia was so panicked her voice was thick with tears. Carolyn, hurry up. You're never this slow. If anything happens to Leo, I'll have your heads. Her trusted servants, who were usually at her beck and call, were taking what felt like an eternity to reach her. What's the point of blaming them? It's not like they're the ones who put me in this state, Leo said, looking into Ophelia's blood-red eyes with a mixture of helplessness and reproach. I know. Ophelia shook her head, full of self-blame. It's me. It's all my fault you're like this. I must look really ugly and scary right now, Leo said with a pained smile. No, you're not ugly at all. Ophelia's tears fell onto Leo's blackened, festering skin. Leo winced in pain. No matter what you look like, no matter how ugly or hideous, I'll never reject you. Don't worry. Ophelia kept wiping her tears away. Well, if you say so. Leo managed a grim smile. Then I guess I really must look pretty awful right now. Ophelia let out a small, tearful laugh. How can you still be saying things like that? Your job right now is to shut up and rest. As soon as I get you back to the city, I'll have the best doctors treat you. Leo cut her off. What if they can't fix me? What if I die? How could you? How could you? Ophelia's voice became high and sharp, almost piercing. You will absolutely not die. How could you die? You won't die. Leo smiled and shook his head slightly. I'm just an ordinary human. Death is a pretty normal thing for someone like me. Absolutely not. Ophelia's face darkened instantly. I'll have the best expert from the Royal Medical Society diagnose you, and I'll bring in the Archbishop from the Order of the Holy Edict to pray for you all night. Then I'll round up every dark sorcerer and mystic in the country. I'll make them bring you back to life, no matter what. Or I'll kill them all. Ophelia's eyes were shadowed and filled with a murderous glint. She truly meant every word. Leo's expression grew serious. Then what if? What if I'm saved this time, and I manage to survive? Then, he looked steadily into her eyes and continued. Will you change? Will you still do things like this? Ophelia froze. Finally, he had brought it up. She looked at Leo's serious face, and her mind inexplicably drifted back to the scenes in the dreamlands. The days with him, without anyone else to disturb them, were quiet and happy. But that was only for her. Leo himself wasn't happy. He didn't like being confined. The bird had battered itself against the wall again and again, bloody and broken. It was only then that Ophelia realized that if she continued, she would likely only get the same result. Thinking of how Leo had walked toward her, step by painful, resolute step, through the corrosive black mist, Ophelia suddenly understood that she had always underestimated him. She had underestimated his will, his determination. Ophelia lowered her head, dejected. She realized she didn't know Leo as well as she thought. His was a soul far harder, colder, and more stubborn than her own. She shook her head in anguish, her heart filled with hesitation and conflict. I don't know. Failure in the dreamlands, again and again. She wasn't without her own analysis. When Carolyn had warned her earlier, she had suspected something, that maybe Leo had indeed been playing some trick of his own. But at the time, obsessive and mad, she couldn't listen to reason. But that wasn't the core of the problem. She slowly lifted her head, looking into those bloodshot, weak eyes that were still fixed unblinkingly on her. Ophelia knew that this path was in fact a dead end. She slumped, sad and disappointed. She felt that no matter what she did, she could never truly bind Leo to her. She had lost, utterly and completely. Leo looked at Ophelia, who seemed to have deflated in an instant. He seemed to know what she was thinking. He smiled gently and tried to stroke her pale cheek. But when he lifted his hand, he found he had no strength left and had to let it fall. "I'll promise you," he said. Ophelia's head snapped up, her blood-red eyes locked on his. "What did you say?" "I said, I'll promise you." Ophelia's face was a mask of disbelief. You'll promise me what? Be specific, don't be so vague. Say it clearly." Leo laughed helplessly. "Of course, I'm promising to be with you, to never be apart, and to never just leave without a word like I did 4 years ago." Ophelia trembled with excitement. She had waited so long to hear those words. Not be apart? Never be apart? Do you know what that means? She repeated loudly, afraid of any ambiguity in his words. "I know." Leo nodded. "I know that given all my lies, you might not believe me so easily when I say this, but it's what I truly want. Do you believe me?" "I believe you, of course I believe you. You're not allowed to go back on your word. You're not allowed to leave me again." Ophelia's voice was excited and hoarse. Having just recovered, she became so agitated that her pupils once again shifted into vertical slits. Fine scales appeared on her skin, and a long, thick, barbed tail sprouted from her back. Leo glanced around. The haunting, corrosive black mist was reappearing. "Ophelia, your powers, could you maybe rein them in a little?" he said wearily. But Ophelia wasn't listening. She was completely lost in her own world of joy. The sky began to darken again. "Together forever, together forever, together forever," she muttered to herself, until an old thought surfaced again. "Wait." Her reptilian pupils instantly locked onto Leo's eyes. "No, you're changing the subject." No. Her voice was sharp. "You already belong to me. It's only natural for us to be together." "That's not the answer I want." Leo was stunned. Seeing the estate's servants drawing closer, Ophelia lowered her voice, hissing at Leo. "I want to be the only one. Go kill the women around you. Then I'll believe you." Leo shook his head with a pained smile. "That's the one thing I can't promise you." "No, that won't do. If you don't, then everything I've done will have been for nothing." Ophelia seemed to have trapped herself in that corner once again. The corrosive black mist erupted around her. She let out a frustrated roar. Her eye grew darker. Shattered rubble began to float into the air, and the faint snarls of ghouls could be heard in the distance. The bizarre world of the Dreamlands was once again invading reality. "Kill them. You have to kill them. You belong only to me. Only me. Ophelia." Leo struggled to his feet. Seeing her about to spread her wings and fly, he threw himself forward recklessly. "Stop. End all of this." "No, I won't." Her corruption rising again, she seemed to lose all reason in an instant, treating Leo, who was trying to stop her, as an enemy. With a sickening squelch, thick black blood dripped onto the ground. Leo looked in shock at the sharp tail that had pierced straight through his chest, then at the frenzied black figure before him. "Leo!" Ophelia snapped back to her senses. The sharp black tail vanished instantly. She frantically supported Leo as he began to fall, her hands pressing uselessly against the bloody hole in his chest. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to. I didn't want to hurt you." But the blood kept flowing, impossible to stop. Ophelia burst into tears. "How could this happen? How could this happen? I didn't want this." Leo coughed violently, spitting up large clots of black blood. Ophelia anxiously supported his collapsing body. Ignoring the shattered glass on the ground, she knelt and gently laid his head on her lap, her eyes fixed on his face. The light in his eyes was fading fast, as if he were at death's door. "Leo, don't die. I was wrong. Please open your eyes, okay?" The thought buried deep in her subconscious, the one that had tormented her with self-blame and regret, resurfaced endless ghost. She had killed Leo. Again. She had killed Leo again. She was a monster. A murderer. It was all her fault. "Don't die. Please open your eyes and look at me. Okay?" It was as if a string inside her finally snapped. She cried out, her body like a madwoman. "I promise you, I'll end all of this. I won't be so selfish anymore. I won't make you kill those women. I won't fight with you anymore. Just stay by my side." Tears streamed down, falling onto Leo's. Suddenly, he slowly opened his eyes. "You said it." Ophelia's eyes went wide with disbelief, then a mixture of shock and joy as she stared at him. Leo? She thought she was dreaming and shook his body again. You're not dead? You're not dead. Leo immediately started coughing violently. Even if I wasn't dead, he rasped, clutching his chest. You're about to shake me to death. Ophelia stopped at once. I'm sorry, I'm sorry. She then glared furiously at her surroundings. Carolyn, Jason, Susan, where are you people? Where's the doctor? I'm going to kill you all. Carolyn, the head maid, and Jason, the leader of the shadow guards, finally came rushing over. Our apologies, Your Highness. Jason bowed his head in shame. Your domain was too large. We had to retreat quite a distance. I'll deal with you later. Ophelia shot him a cold look, then turned to Carolyn. The doctor is here. The estate's doctor, flanked by servants, came running with a first aid kit. Your Highness, your injuries. He stopped beside Ophelia and began rummaging through his kit. Not me. Him. Ophelia looked ready to murder him. Oh, right. I'll examine Mr. Sterling right away. The doctor stumbled over to Leo's side. As the doctor examined his wounds and applied burn ointment, Leo winced, even though the doctor's movements were gentle. I'm fine, really. Doctor, the biggest help you can be is not touching me. Inside his body, the corrupted blood was flowing rapidly, boiling like a geyser as it poured into the ruby-like blood core within him. That core, unique to vampires, was like a second heart, pumping with even greater force. This was the source of a vampire's incredible healing ability. As long as the injury wasn't fatal, meaning the blood core itself wasn't destroyed, even could regenerate. Before the doctor could even finish bandaging him, Leo body stiffly. He waved his hand, dismissing the crowd, and struggled to meet a pair of pale eyes that had long since returned to normal. Ophelia corruption level. 60 foot what you said just now. Does it still count? Leo asked, a faint smile on his lips. What did I say? What counts or doesn't count? Ophelia turned her head away petulantly, refusing to meet his gaze. To her surprise, Leo gritted his teeth and stood up, swaying on his feet, and planted himself directly in front of her. He put his hands on her shoulders, forcing her to look at him. Now, she couldn't escape. She pouted, still trying to be stubborn. I said a lot of things. Which one are you asking about? Leo suddenly clutched his chest in pain. Leo, Ophelia cried, rushing to support him. I'm dying. I think I'm bleeding internally. It must have been that stab from earlier. Leo moaned, his pained expression making Ophelia more and more alarmed. Even with her ability, honed in the cold, calculating court, to read micro-expressions and detect lies, her judgment was clouded by concern. Faced with Leo like this, it was a complete mess. Stop it. Can't you just lie down and rest for a bit? Stop being so stubborn. Can't do that. Leo glanced at her, his voice faint. Someone's heartfelt promise turns out to be fake. Alas, I guess I'll die with regrets today. Seeing his roguish behavior, Ophelia couldn't help but laugh through her frustration. Then, her expression softened. Ignoring the onlookers completely, she stepped forward and gently cupped his face. A passionate and fierce kiss silenced his incessant murmuring. The estate maids all gasped and lowered their heads. Leo's eyes shot wide open. Ophelia's kiss was clumsy and awkward, yet domineering. It started out inexperienced, but quickly became more confident. In that sweet, soft tangle, the two of them became dizzy, both lost in the magical, intoxicating atmosphere, forgetting the passage of time. After a long while, they finally, reluctantly, broke apart. Ophelia's arms were wrapped around Leo's neck. She was breathing heavily, a flush of red on her cheeks. Leo looked at her helplessly, then glanced at Carolyn, who was covering her mouth to stifle a laugh. Are you answering my question with that? Or just changing the subject? Ophelia gave him a sly smile. I hate lying, so I always keep my word. She leaned in close to his ear and whispered, but don't get too happy just yet. Leo looked at her, confused. The warm, intimate breath tickled his ear. He heard Ophelia's smiling voice. I'm going to give you a gift. What gift? Leo was even more bewildered. Ophelia's lips curled into an alluring smile, like a dangerous poppy flower. The gift is me. Leo's jaw dropped. He pulled back, staring into her pale eyes in astonishment. Ophelia let out a wicked giggle. I can't wait to see the angry expressions on your women's faces when they find out I was the first one to have you. Leo looked at Ophelia helplessly. Her eyes were narrowed slightly, her face practically screaming. I'm about to cause some serious trouble. A headache began to bloom in Leo's temples. The situation between Helena and Professor Evelyn was already a powder keg. if he added this one to the mix. He couldn't imagine the kind of chaos that would erupt in that old house. And he had a feeling that the other two combined wouldn't be a match for Ophelia. After all, Ophelia could call for backup. The more he thought about it, the worse his headache got. He decided to put out of his mind for now. That was a problem for future Leo. He looked at Ophelia again, wanting to ask what she planned to do next. The entire grand estate had been blown to smithereens by the out-of-control Ethereum crystals. Staying here was impossible. More importantly, the massive explosion would definitely attract the attention of the capital. Leo didn't know if she would truly keep her promise, but regardless, if she still wanted to keep him locked up, it was no longer a realistic option. To his surprise, Ophelia, who had been so animated just a moment ago, suddenly swayed, her body slumping weakly. "Ophelia, Your Highness!" Leo shot forward and caught Ophelia just as she was about to collapse. In his arms, Ophelia's face was as white as paper. She looked weak and exhausted, even worse off than he was. Leo placed the back of his hand on her forehead and found it was burning up. "You have a fever?" Seeing Leo's worried expression, Ophelia managed a weak smile. "It's nothing. I'm just a little tired." She curled up contentedly in Leo's arms and closed her eyes. "Let me sleep for a bit. Just a little while." The maids gathered around anxiously. Carolyn gave Leo a weary smile. Before this, Her Highness hadn't slept for 3 days and 3 nights. Leo nodded. For the past 2 weeks, Ophelia had been suffering from chronic insomnia due to her research into the dreamlands. And for the past few days, she had descended into a state of extreme, obsessive mania, foregoing food and rest. Combined with the overexertion of her powers today, her body had long since reached its breaking point. Leo sighed, looking down at her in his arms. "You really are a stubborn one." Ophelia was already fast asleep. Her closed eyelashes fluttered slightly, as if she were having a restless dream. Leo tried to hand her over to Carolyn, but even in her sleep, her slender hand gripped his wrist tightly, refusing to let go. Leo could only try to soothe her. "This isn't the place to rest. Be good, let go." Ophelia mumbled something in her sleep. Don't go." Leo looked at her helplessly. "I'm not going anywhere. I'm right here." Ophelia murmured anxiously. "Leo, don't die. Don't die." It seemed that in her dream, Leo was still dying over and over again. Leo shook his head with a small smile. Seeing that he couldn't pull his hand free, he lowered his head and whispered close to her ear. "I'm not going to die, and I'm not going to leave you. You rest for a few days, and we'll see each other again soon." As he spoke, a mischievous smile played on his lips. "Besides, how could I possibly leave? I'm still waiting for your gift, you know. You have to be well-rested and at your best for that, don't you? You?" At his words, the sleeping Ophelia seemed to actually hear him. A peaceful, contented smile spread across her face, and she finally settled down. Leo was at last able to withdraw his arm. He handed Ophelia over to the dutiful headmaid. Then, he looked at her with a serious expression and instructed, "I'm mostly fine now. You need to get her back to New Haven immediately. Her condition is far more serious than mine." Corruption and backlash from the supernatural domain were always tricky problems, completely different from ordinary illnesses. A regular doctor wouldn't be able to handle it. "Of course, Mr. Sterling." Carolyn nodded gratefully. She then immediately began ordering the other servants. "Quick, prepare a carriage. We're taking Her Highness back." As Carolyn was making arrangements, a sudden commotion came from outside the estate ruins. A shadow guard on watch appeared in an instant beside the others. He approached the shadow guard leader, Jason, and reported something in a low voice. "What?" Jason, whose face was usually a stoic mask, immediately looked toward the vast farmlands of the southern suburbs and pulled out a spyglass. "What's going on?" Leo asked, walking over. Following their gaze, he also looked into the distance. The estate was situated on high ground. Even with the naked eye, Leo could see a convoy of unfamiliar white carriages speeding down the road that led to the estate. There were so many of them that they kicked up a large cloud of yellow dust. Jason lowered the spyglass, his face grim. He initially didn't want to say much to Leo, but considering his special relationship with the princess, he hesitated for a moment before explaining. "The people coming belong to the Order of the Holy Edict." After he said this, the expressions of everyone present turned strange. The shadow guards vanished, hiding themselves in the surrounding area. Carolyn and the maids took on a defensive posture, as if preparing for battle. Leo saw the muscular maid's arms begin to swell again. The Order of the Holy Edict? Leo racked his brain, trying to remember the game's lore. The Order of the Holy Edict was the church's military arm, composed entirely of supernaturally gifted individuals. They were responsible for protecting the church, and under the authority of the emperor and the archbishop, using force to purify all the profane and evil forces in the world. The Order and the Bureau of Special Investigations were the empire's only two official supernatural organizations. But Leo had had more contact with the latter. His impression of the church, and especially the Order, was not a good one. Any being deemed a heretic, a threat to society, a spreader of chaos and corruption, or one who has made a pact with a dark god, would face the Order's relentless crusade. If the ones who had been hunting Helena had been the Order instead of the P5.I, Leo probably would have never seen her again in that alley. But the problem was, Leo frowned and looked at Carolyn. Why did they have such a reaction to seeing the Order? Ophelia was indeed an anomaly, but she was the fifth princess. And it wasn't like the old emperor didn't know. Carolyn saw Leo's confusion and quickly explained. The Order is controlled by the third prince. The third prince. Leo was startled. That was a name he hadn't expected. Carolyn said in a low voice, His Majesty has already executed several bishops and placed his own people in the church. And this so-called own person is the Order's current acting Grand Master, Her Highness's brother, the third prince. With that explanation, everything clicked for Leo. This was indeed trouble. The ones who should have been alerted were the NHBED or the P5.I, but the Order had suddenly intervened. Leo knew this was no coincidence. He didn't believe for a second that the Order was here to provide disaster relief or cleanse evil. It was all because Ophelia was the third prince's rival. Even that shocking airship bombing had been the third prince's welcome home gift to his sister. Like a hyena smelling blood on the savannah, the brother Ophelia had never met had arrived with an obvious purpose. But why is he so determined to kill Ophelia? Leo wondered. Where did this bone-deep hatred come from? They were rivals, yes, but given how out of favor Ophelia was with the old emperor, she probably didn't even have a seat at the table yet. Her brothers had been sent to the military, the church, or the provinces at a young age to gain experience. But Ophelia had only gained a tiny bit of power 4 years ago. All the wealth and influence she had now, she had fought tooth and nail for, bit by bit. Though his mind was racing, only a few seconds had passed. When Leo looked around again, he had already formulated a plan. The other on high alert. With Ophelia unconscious, they had lost their leader. He called out in a sharp, cold voice. Carolyn, Jason. Mr. Sterling. Carolyn looked at him in surprise. Jason was also taken aback by Leo's commanding tone, but showed no displeasure, merely looking at him quietly. Get Ophelia out of here immediately. You have to be discreet. The third prince must not find out she's in a weakened state. Right. Carolyn nodded immediately. She hoisted the sleeping Ophelia onto her back and rushed toward the estate ruins. Quick, a few of you. Help clear a path. There's a secret tunnel in the basement that leads to the lakeside cabin. With clear orders, the servants on site began to move with purpose. Jason looked at Leo silently. He and Carolyn, one responsible for the princess's protection, the other for her daily life, had followed her orders for years without a single mistake. But they had never encountered a situation like today, where the princess was unable to give commands. Nor had they ever imagined that this man, so close to the princess, would issue orders in her name. But they had all instinctively obeyed him, perhaps because of their close relationship, or perhaps because he was genuinely thinking of her best interests. What next? Jason asked. The third prince will not give up easily. This entire southern suburban area is probably swarming with his men. Leo looked at him, his expression serious. Stall. Stall until our reinforcements arrive. Reinforcements? Jason looked puzzled. What reinforcements do they have? The armed forces from the princess's fiefdom? It would take them a month to get here. Don't worry. Leo reassured him with a smile. There would be reinforcements. Less than 5 minutes after Carolyn left with Ophelia, the convoy of carriages screeched to a halt where the estate's main gate once stood. A large number of Order members appeared, systematically surrounding their position. Leo noted they wore uniform light armor and simple white capes, with a cruciform longsword at their waists. At first glance, they looked no different from a traditional knightly order. However, a closer look revealed a large-caliber, double-barreled shotgun holstered on their right hip. The design of the firearm was both exquisite and brutal. Exquisite because it was engraved with intricate runes that shimmered with the mystical light of mithril, and brutal because the thing was clearly for close-quarters combat, and it fired shot. It could probably blast a man to pieces with a single shot. This church-backed military force, equipped with both cold steel and firearms, gave off a strange so, has the era changed or not? Kind of vibe. Kind of vibe. We are the Order of the Holy Edict, under the authority of the church. A tall, imposing knight stepped forward, his face a cold mask. We detected the foul presence of an evil entity here. This is a matter of utmost importance. Please cooperate with our investigation immediately. His tone wasn't one of introduction, but of direct command. As he finished speaking, the other knights quickly began to secure the scene. Ophelia's staff watched them with cold eyes. Chaos erupted as the Order members began searching through the crowd without so much as a by your leave. But they seemed to have a target in mind, bypassing the maids and other servants, their eyes scanning the faces of the group for someone specific. They were definitely looking for Ophelia. Thank God she wasn't here. Meanwhile, another squad was investigating the ruins of the estate. Your Highness, there's a residual evil presence here. A knight holding a detection device shouted, having found something. The device, which had been glowing with a holy white light, suddenly flickered, its light nearly extinguishing. Such a strong, foul presence. It's like a dark god has descended. The Order members immediately tensed up. At the same time, a man, surrounded by a large contingent of knights, walked slowly toward them. Leo noticed his expression wasn't as tense as the others. Instead, a faint smile played on his lips. He was the one they called Your Highness, a young man with brilliant golden hair and light blue eyes. He had to be Ophelia's brother, the third prince of the empire. Upon seeing the flickering device, the third prince feigned surprise. To so brazenly unleash this kind of power in our most important capital city. It seems Father's decision to release her was a mistake. The third prince chuckled softly. A harbinger of disaster is a harbinger of disaster. No matter where you put her, the moment you look away, she causes trouble. He wiped the smile from his face, his gaze sweeping over the estate staff. He waved his hand. Numerous knights immediately moved forward, encircling the group and pulling out silver, glowing handcuffs. What do you think you're doing? This is the property of Her Royal Highness, the princess. Jason snorted, stepping in front of them. The moment Jason moved, the knights drew their guns, the dark muzzles all aimed at him. The third prince looked at him coolly. Where is your master? Have her come out. Isn't she usually so hands-on? Why is she letting a subordinate like you stand in front? Jason remained silent, merely glaring at the third prince. The third prince glanced at the surrounding ruins. She's not coming out. Could it be that after causing this disaster, she's fled to escape punishment? The muscular maid was hot-tempered. Undaunted by the prince's status, she cursed him out. A creature like you isn't worthy of seeing our princess. You butcher. You disgrace to the holy light. You scum of the church. Stop putting on a show. Silence. You ill-mannered slave. The third prince's retainers were also enraged. Their fingers tightened on the triggers of their guns, ready to fire at a moment's notice. The third prince wasn't angered. He just narrowed his eyes and smiled. To purify evil and filth, to guide the people under the holy light of the true gods, has always been the duty of our church. Not even a princess is above the law. He spoke with sanctimonious righteousness. You people have aided and abetted a tyrant, assisting Ophelia in worshiping heretical dark gods and attempting to spread corruption and chaos. You have severely endangered public safety. You must all be arrested and brought back to the church for judgment. At his words, Ophelia's loyal staff looked incensed. If they didn't already know what kind of person this third prince was, he might have actually sounded convincing. The estate staff now wore expressions that showed no fear of death. Leo noticed Jason's wrist twitch slightly, as if he were a second away from planting a dagger in the third prince's chest. Just as the situation was about to explode, Leo spoke slowly. Your Highness, as far as I know, His Majesty assigned this matter to the Bureau of Special Investigations. Did he not? All eyes turned to Leo. The third prince frowned at the unfamiliar face. Leo smiled faintly. This isn't within the church's jurisdiction at all. For your Highness to make such a big show of force. Isn't that a bit of an overreach? Overreach. The third prince laughed as if he'd heard the funniest joke in the world. Anything related to evil forces and evil creatures can be handled by our church. That is our duty. Did you not understand what I just said? Leo knew, of course, that the church had a very broad mandate in these matters and had always acted as such. However, they seemed to have forgotten that this was no ordinary case. You know, Your Highness. He chuckled. I thought you were here to apprehend the culprit of the heinous airship bombing. I didn't realize you were here to settle a personal score. If His Majesty knew you were mobilizing the Order's forces just to cause trouble for the princess, wouldn't he be disappointed? Airship bombing? The third prince paused. What airship bombing? Leo pointed to the ruined estate. Are you blind? The culprit just escaped. If you don't go after them now, it'll be too late. The third prince's face darkened. Are you messing with me? What does this have to do with the airship bombing? What doesn't it have to do with it? Leo crossed his arms, glancing pointedly at the estate staff. Susan May was quick on the uptake, her head bobbing up and down. Yes, it was that same culprit. The same methods, using out-of-control Ethereum crystals as explosives. Soon, the other servants began to murmur among themselves, all condemning the damned bomber, spewing all sorts of curses. The vile language made the third prince's face contort, and even his aide looked at him awkwardly. Leo watched the third prince's increasingly ugly expression, his own smile growing wider. If the New Haven bombing really was his doing, then every word was a direct accusation, and there was nothing he could do about it. The third prince must have been monitoring Ophelia's residence. He thought he could use the excuse of practicing dark magic and endangering society to cause trouble, but he never expected it to be entangled with another, higher priority case. Enough, the third prince snapped. One thing at a time. The bombing is one matter. This case of dark sorcery is another. The bombing suspect has escaped. Right now, I need to arrest you, Ophelia's lackeys. As he spoke, the knights moved in. The estate's servants backed away nervously, while the combat maids and shadow guards tensed, ready to fight. The third prince was dead set on arresting everyone here. A conflict seemed unavoidable. Leo watched the third prince with cold eyes. The man had dropped all pretense, his face a mask of triumphant malice. Leo didn't know how he could stall any longer, and just then, another group arrived on the scene. Camera flashes flickered. Reporters chattered amongst themselves. The barking of police dogs filled the air. Leo was overjoyed to see them. Officers from the New Haven Police Department and agents from the Bureau of Special Investigations had finally arrived. New Haven Police Department. This is an active crime scene. All unauthorized personnel, clear the area immediately. Captain Raymond's appeared at the estate gate like a hero making a grand entrance. At the same time, a worried girl's cry rang out. Brother, I finally found you. Leo followed the voice and saw a worried-looking Helena running toward him. Captain Raymond's, who caught sight of Leo at the same time, did a double take. Good Lord, when the world happened to you? I almost didn't recognize you. Leo's current appearance was indeed a mess. His clothes were riddled with holes from the corrosive mist, his hair was singed and curled, and his skin was blackened and covered in festering cuts and scrapes. It was a wonder Ophelia had been able to kiss him at all. Leo gave the captain a weary smile, then turned to Helena, who had finally reached him. Her blue eyes were wide with disbelief. Brother, how did you get so badly hurt? Helena carefully took Leo's arm. When she saw the horrifying wounds covering it, her voice trembled. How did this happen? Does it hurt, brother? Watching her gently touch his wounds, Leo couldn't help but think that this was after he had already healed a bit. If Helena had seen him at the beginning, she probably would have been scared half to death. As he was comforting Helena, a rich, magnetic female voice spoke up beside them. Those look like burns. Don't touch them, you'll cause an infection. Professor Evelyn had arrived right behind Helena. Her dark green eyes were fixed on Helena with disapproval. Let me. Helena quickly let go, making way for the professional. Evelyn simply met Leo's gaze for a moment before looking down and rummaging through her bag. She pulled out a bottle of cool ointment and began to apply it to Leo's arm with gentle, expert movements. Helena stood by quietly, not daring to speak for fear of distracting her. Leo looked at Helena's worried, upset face, then at Evelyn, who hadn't said much to him but was silently treating his wounds. A smile unconsciously spread across his lips. Though it had only been half a month, seeing them again felt like a lifetime had passed. Perhaps it was because the memories from the dreamlands were so vivid. He had unknowingly spent countless days with Ophelia, which had blurred his sense of time. Noticing Leo's smile, Evelyn asked, "What are you grinning about?" Leo shook his head. "Nothing." Evelyn continued her work, muttering, "Injuries this severe. Even the toughest members of my family would probably be screaming in agony. But you can actually manage a smile." She looked up again. "Don't tell me being locked up for 2 weeks has made you go soft in the head?" Leo smiled and shook his head. "No, I was just thinking. It's really good to see you too." While Evelyn was treating his wounds, Leo saw Captain Raymond's negotiating with the third prince's men. Evelyn had also been keeping an eye on the argument. She lowered her voice and asked Leo, "What happened to you? Was it the fifth princess?" Before Leo could explain, Helena said, her face dark with murderous intent, "That damn woman. To think she would hurt you like this, brother. I'll never forgive her." She looked around grimly. "Where is she? Don't tell me she ran off after hurting you." "She did leave, but," Leo said, seeing the growing killing intent in Helena's eyes and quickly trying to explain. "It's a long story. For now, don't worry about her. We have a more pressing matter at hand." He gestured with his eyes toward the third prince, who was surrounded by his men. "Isn't that Ophelia's brother, the third prince of the empire?" Evelyn frowned. "From the sound of it, he wants to arrest you too?" "Humph." Helena snorted. "Not a single one in that family is any good. They all deserve to die." Leo quickly shushed her and listened to Captain Raymond's. "We received a tip from a concerned citizen that Leo Sterling is very likely a key suspect in the capital airship bombing. We are here to apprehend him. Your Highness, please do not obstruct the New Haven Police Department in carrying out its duties." Hearing the captain's words, Leo froze. "A suspect? Him?" He immediately turned his gaze to Evelyn, who was right beside him. "You wouldn't happen to be that concerned citizen, would you?" Evelyn gave him an embarrassed smile. "I had no choice. It was a last resort. Otherwise, I wasn't confident I could get you out of the fifth princess's hands." She looked at Leo anxiously. "Hey, you're not mad at me, are you? This was the best plan I could come up with." Seeing no reaction on Leo's face, she lowered her voice and added quickly, "Don't worry. You're not the real bomber. At worst, you'll just have to spend some time at the station. Besides, Captain Raymond will vouch for you." Evelyn puffed out her chest confidently. "And if, and this is a big if, they still don't let you go, I'll have my family bail you out. Don't you worry. Don't you worry." Leo stared at her in surprise. Her family. Professor Evelyn would actually ask her family for help. Hadn't she cut all ties with that vampire family? She had said she would never speak to them again, that she would rather live in a dilapidated mansion downtown, worrying about her next meal and living off her meager school salary than go back. Looking at Evelyn, who was so confidently promising to back him up, Leo suddenly felt a wave of gratitude. He never thought she would go against her own principles for him. Evelyn noticed his expression, and her face immediately turned cold. "Don't get the wrong idea. I'm not doing this for you." Leo just smiled at her. Evelyn turned away and explained, "You're the one who said that after the containment, our fates were tied together. I just don't want anything to happen to you, and have it drag me down too." Watching her forced explanation, the smile on Leo's face grew wider. Evelyn's cheeks grew redder. Standing off to the side, Helena suddenly said flatly, "Lies." Evelyn shot her a furious glare. "Who said I was lying? Where did I lie? It's true." She shot a quick glance at Leo, then looked down and muttered, "I'm not doing all this because I'm worried about him. I'm just looking out for myself." All right. The professor has no feelings. The professor is the embodiment of cool confidence." Leo shook his head with a smile, deciding not to push the proud woman any further. Instead, he said gratefully, "You did great. Neither Ophelia nor the third prince could have expected this turn of events." The three of them looked around. Police officers with dogs were securing the scene, setting up a long line of police tape. Outside the tape, camera flashes flickered incessantly. Several news reporters had arrived, eagerly questioning the annoyed officers. This had to be Professor Evelyn's handiwork as well. It created an undeniable high ground in the court of public opinion. Even the unscrupulous third prince would have to be careful to maintain his public image as a devout follower of the faith. Besides the cops from a New Haven police department and the flock of vultures from the press, Leo noticed another faction in the crowd. They were a small group, not in uniform, their appearances and mannerisms a strange and secretive assortment. They stood silently not far from him, their posture suggesting they'd swarm him at the slightest wrong move. It took Leo a moment to recognize two familiar faces among them, the wizard and the hunter he'd run into in a previous save file, the ones Evelyn had called for backup. These were Bureau of Special Investigations agents. A wry smile touched Leo's lips. It seemed that for his sake, both of the government's major supernatural organizations had been mobilized. Evelyn finished bandaging his arm. As they both stood up, a pair of police officers stepped forward and cuffed him, then led him over to Captain Raymond's. The third prince shot Leo a dismissive glance before turning his attention to Captain Raymond's and a man in a black overcoat standing beside him. "You can take this one," the prince said, his tone imperious. "But," he pointed a finger at the estate staff, "these accomplices, these puppets of a dark power, I'm taking all of them." As his words fell, The terrified gazes of several maids darted toward Leo. "Oh, that's fine with us," Captain Raymond began, but Leo subtly nudged him with his elbow. The BSI agents tensed instantly, their eyes locked on Leo as they roughly yanked him back. "Don't touch my brother," Helena snarled, her voice sharp with fury. Evelyn's eyes flashed with a dangerous light. "Sorry, wasn't paying attention," Leo muttered, quickly catching Raymond's eye. The captain paused, a flicker of confusion in his eyes, then understanding dawned. "Right. As for these people," he stroked his chin, turning to the third prince and shaking his head. "They're all material witnesses. They have to be brought back to the station for questioning. Your Highness, you can't take them." "What did you say?" A vein of anger pulsed in the third prince's gaze. He was here to make trouble for his fifth sister. Even though she'd already fled, taking her entire senior staff into custody would still be a significant victory. With witnesses and evidence in hand, the news would inevitably reach his father the king. Ophelia would be humiliated, and he could systematically dismantle her power base. It was a perfect plan, but he hadn't counted on so many meddlers showing up. "Your Highness." The older man in the black coat stepped forward, offering a polite but unyielding smile. The Bureau of Special Investigations was personally assigned to this case by His Majesty. He tapped his coat pocket. "I have the royal decree right here, stamped by the king himself. Would you care to see it?" "Enough." The prince's patience snapped. He was done dealing with these long-winded bureaucrats. The BSI and the Order of the Holy Edict had always been at odds, and more importantly, these agents were acting on his father's direct orders. He had no authority to stop them. As the third prince finally relented, the senior police officers on the scene breathed a collective sigh of relief. Raymond glanced back at Leo, then waved a hand at his men. "All right, pack it up. We'll sort this out back at the precinct." In stark contrast to the cuffed Leo, the police treated the estate staff with far more courtesy. After all, they worked for the fifth princess and weren't actual suspects. As Jason, the head of the Shadow Guards, walked past Leo, a rare, grateful smile touched his usually stoic face. Every servant on this estate now owed Leo a favor. Leo gave him a slight nod. Over the past couple of weeks, his relationship with these people hadn't exactly been one of camaraderie. He and Ophelia had been locked in a daily cycle of affection and assassination attempts, and her staff were all accessories to the fact. The fact that he wasn't kicking them while they were down was generous enough. But to Leo, Ophelia was one of his own, and her people, by extension, were his people too. The third prince was an outsider, and Leo couldn't let Ophelia's weaknesses fall into the hands of a rival, especially a rival in a literal life-or-death struggle. Of their 5 siblings, the first prince was already dead under mysterious circumstances. Leo was certain that even the calculating Ophelia from the beginning wouldn't use his enemies against him. This was their game, a strange and unspoken understanding between them. As Leo was led away, the third prince watched his retreating back, a deep frown creasing his brow. This was supposed to be an arrest, but from every angle, it looked more like a rescue. He couldn't understand why this man was so important that so many powerful players would come to his defense. The New Haven Police Department, the Bureau of Special Investigations, and even the notoriously secretive Abraham family from the highest echelons of the empire. The woman with him was supposedly the family's designated heir. The third prince knew they weren't here for a simple bombing suspect. He knew who was really behind that. So, what was so special about this man? He mulled over the name, and suddenly his eyes widened slightly. He beckoned to a confidant hidden among his knights, who quietly moved closer. "If I recall correctly, his name is Leo?" The confidant nodded immediately. "Yes, your highness. Leo Sterling." The prince shot him a surprised look, lowering his voice. "The same Leo Sterling that Ophelia has been searching the world for. The very same, your highness. I pulled his file years ago. It's him." The third prince's gaze fixed on Leo's departing figure, his expression growing darker. Anyone Ophelia would go to such lengths to find must have some unique, hidden talent. The people she's recruited these past few years have all been formidable. I wanted to watch this man closely. Do not underestimate him. "Yes, your highness," the confidant affirmed with a nod. After the BSI agents bundled Leo into a vehicle, Helena rushed to follow, but they blocked her from getting in. "Let me in. I want to ride with my brother." The stone-faced agents ignored her, slamming the car door shut. Just as Helena's temper was about to explode, Evelyn quickly grabbed her arm. "Calm down. Your brother is out of danger now. Don't worry." But Helena's strength was surprisingly immense, and she wouldn't listen, pulling against Evelyn's grip. Evelyn gave a helpless smile. She was well aware of the obsessive nature of Leo's little sister. She began patting her on the back, cooing as if to a child. Hey, SHHH, don't be impulsive. Otherwise, even if your brother isn't a suspect now, you're going to make him one. Inside the car, Leo exchanged a few words with the agents, and the window slowly rolled down. He looked out at Helena with a gentle expression. Be good, Helena. You might be able to visit me at the station in a few days. Okay. Helena looked at him through the window, her expression crestfallen, but she finally calmed down a little. Leo then turned to Evelyn with a smile. I'm leaving her in your care. Try to make sure she doesn't do something crazy like stage a prison break. Don't worry. Evelyn let out a chuckle. You just sit tight and think about what you've done. And while you're at it, do some soul-searching about why you attract so many women. It was the classic, merciless ribbing of Professor Evelyn. Leo just shook his head and laughed. Professor, thanks for looking after the house. Everything's all right there, I hope. It was meant to be a polite, throwaway question. But the guilty look that flashed across Evelyn's face made Leo's brow furrow. Yes, everything's great. Just great, Evelyn said, a little too quickly. You should get going. Don't you worry about a thing. Good thing he can't see what a disaster the mansion is right now, she thought. Snack wrappers everywhere. It looks like a pigsty. I'll have to clean it up before he gets back. Right, I'll make Helena clean it. Beast in Bedlam Asylum. Leo gazed through the iron bars of his window at the increasingly desolate street below and sighed. It had been 7 days since the police department had transferred him to this asylum, and they showed no signs of letting him out. The accommodations weren't bad. He had a large, private room with plenty of sunlight, but he wasn't allowed to leave it. If it weren't for Helena and Evelyn visiting every 3 days, he probably would have gone stir-crazy from the boredom. Staring at the monotonous view, Leo let out a weary yawn. He set aside the occult book Helena had brought to pass the time and tried once more to channel his blood magic. A faint crimson glow emanated from his palm, flickered for a moment, and then died. Still nothing, huh? Leo lifted his wrist, the movement accompanied by the heavy clank of metal. Considered an extremely dangerous individual, he'd been fitted with a special pair of manacles. Leo examined them closely. The brass-colored surface was etched with a dense network of twisted runes. The device seemed to nullify a certain degree of magical energy and was incredibly durable. The interesting part, however, was that he could still use his blood magic to heal. His body had fully recovered within 2 days of arriving. This meant the cuffs only suppressed offensive powers, likely due to some highly sophisticated magical ward. Leo did have one idea for getting them off: chopping off his own hands. Of course, it was just a thought. He had no desire to escape this madhouse. He wasn't crazy, nor was he guilty of any crime. During his first few days at the precinct, after several nights of rigorous interrogation, he had already cleared his name. But instead of being released, he was transferred to the notoriously infamous Bedlam Asylum, a place renowned for its distinguished alumni. The reason behind it was, frankly, a bit ridiculous. While he was no longer a suspect in the airship bombing, his past exploits had come to light. With so much at stake, Captain Raymond's had been forced to reveal their previous collaborations. The confession had terrified the P5.I bigwig in the black overcoat. The agent heard that Leo was connected to a slew of strange and difficult cases from 4 years ago and immediately pegged him as some kind of hidden mastermind. From a logical standpoint, it was bizarre for an ordinary student to be mixed up in those cases. He practically screamed, "Suspect, suspect." Not even Captain Raymond's repeated assurances that Leo was fine, just a neurotic kid with a passion for investigating mysteries, could convince them otherwise. And so, Leo was brought here, locked in a room with iron bars and an iron door, under heavy guard on the top floor of a tower. The only way out was to jump. He listlessly flipped through his book again, finding that only the ocean of knowledge could keep the boredom at bay. As he was reading, the heavy iron door creaked and slowly swung open. Captain Raymond's walked in with a teasing smile. "Well, look at you hitting the books. A true scholar of Blackwood Academy." Leo shot him an annoyed glare, then noticed 2 elegant figures following behind him. "Brother, I'm here to see you." Helena, dressed in a small skirt, fluttered in like a butterfly. Professor Evelyn followed with a smile, her hands full of fruit and snacks. The guard outside cast a wary glance at Leo before the iron door slammed shut again. Today was his scheduled visiting day. He hadn't expected Captain Raymond's to come along. Evelyn sat on the edge of his cot and, after a moment, handed him a peeled apple. "You look like you're adjusting well to life in the asylum." "You have no idea." Leo took the apple and bit into it with a vengeance. I sleep in every day, no classes, free room and board. At night, I even get a free choir performance from the patients downstairs. This life, Leo mumbled, couldn't be more exciting. Evelyn chuckled at his theatrics. Since you like it so much, maybe you should just stay here. We won't bother taking you with us. Leo instantly grabbed her sleeve, his face a mask of mock despair. No, please no. My dearest professor, you have to get me out of here. He looked into her amused, deep green eyes and whined. I'll even go back to school, I swear. I can't spend another second in this place. Helena immediately asked with concern, Is it bad here, brother? Are the other patients bothering you? Her face turned cold. If they're bullying you, I'll kill them for you. Leo shook his head wearily. It's not that. I don't even see them. It's just... At night, the whole asylum erupted into a cacophony of wails and howls. The patients on the floor below him were a real cast of characters. There was one who loudly cursed demons while reciting church scriptures, another who sang endlessly, and one who babbled in a frantic, mad tongue. And every so often, a strange, unearthly shriek would echo through the halls. After finally escaping the dreamlands, he managed a few nights of decent sleep at the precinct. Now his insomnia was back with a vengeance. Captain Raymond's couldn't help but laugh. You mean the guy downstairs? I think he's a cultist from the Cult of Truth, a pretty high-ranking one at that. He tried to console Leo. You know how those people are, all worshipping some heretical god, turning themselves into monsters. The BSI will let you out in a few days. Just hang in there. How many is a few days? Leo only cared about how much longer he had to stay. It should be soon. Captain Raymond glanced at Evelyn, who was sitting quietly nearby. He'd never imagined that Leo's girlfriend was a member of the Abraham family. That legendary old house held immense power within the empire, yet they were famously mysterious. To think one of them would become an ordinary university professor and be sitting right next to him. And it wasn't just the Abraham family applying pressure on the Justice Department. There were members of the royal family involved as well. Even the BSI couldn't withstand that kind of heat. Besides, Leo was innocent. His release was only a matter of time. Raymond looked at Leo's complaining face and cracked another joke. You should count your blessings. This asylum houses some of the most infamous figures in the country, especially this room. He leaned in conspiratorially. The previous tenants were heavyweights. Heavyweights. Leo's curiosity was piqued. Like who? Captain Raymond started counting on his fingers. Let's see. There was a dark wizard who leveled a city, a cult leader, a former director of the BSI, and, well, that's all I can think of off the top of my head. Leo rolled his eyes. So, I should be honored? Of course. Evelyn giggled, covering her mouth. Being locked in the same room as people whose names alone could make someone cry just proves how impressive you are, doesn't it? You flatter me, Professor, Leo said, giving her a deadpan look. Oomph. Stop teasing my brother. Helena shot a glare at the laughing Evelyn. This woman was getting more and more out of line lately, and she seemed to be getting closer to Leo, too. Helena looked sourly at the half-eaten apple in Leo's hand, then snatched it away with a huff. She replaced it with a soft roll she had brought. Brother, eat this. Leo looked at her helplessly. I'm not hungry. Seeing Helena's expression darken, he had no choice but to take the freshly baked bread. Okay, I'm hungry. He took a small bite, thinking to himself that she really had a thing for bread. But he just had lunch. Only then did Helena's face relax into a satisfied smile. TCH. Evelyn rolled her eyes. She couldn't believe Helena would get jealous over something so trivial. Leo ate the bread awkwardly, the atmosphere in the room growing stranger by the second. But the person with the most peculiar expression was Captain Raymond's. He watched the odd dynamic between the three of them, his face a mixture of shock and confusion. Leo's family life seems complicated, he thought. The sister is acting like she's staking her claim. That's no sister. She's more possessive than the actual girlfriend. Then, the captain's thoughts drifted to the fifth princess, the other one who'd been pulling strings. Leo's current predicament was largely her fault, which meant there was something going on between them two. Captain Raymond scratched his head, completely bewildered. He couldn't make sense of their relationships at all. He just felt utterly stunned. As the air in a room grew thicker with unspoken tension, Captain Raymond put on his cap and stood up to leave. Well, I'll let you three talk. I've got things to do. Thank you for everything, Captain, Evelyn said with a polite, grateful smile. I know how busy you've been, yet you still took the time to check on things here. It's nothing. Just doing my job, the captain sighed. Leo noticed the deep exhaustion etched on Raymond's face. Is it still because of that case? He asked. Yes, but it's more than just the case. Captain Raymond stared silently out the window. Leo followed his gaze. The asylum was located in a less bustling part of the East End, but even so, the street outside was unnaturally quiet. It was something that had been nagging at him for days. The wide avenues were empty. Not a single pedestrian, no carriages, not one Magitech vehicle. In the distance, the entire atmosphere of New Haven fell off. The towering smokestacks that once belched black smoke day and night were now still. As a result, the air quality had improved significantly. It meant that most of New Haven's factories had shut down. This was highly unusual. This was the city of steam, a hub of immense productivity. That endless sprawl of factories was the source of all wealth, a veritable money-printing machine for the empire. As Captain Raymond explained, Leo's frown deepened. It was all fallout from the Royal airship bombing. People in the capital and in other major cities had developed a fear of Magitech industry. A wave of panic was sweeping the nation, with everyone afraid that a similar catastrophe could strike them at any moment. A lot has happened in New Haven while you've been away, the captain sighed. The schools have been forced to close, there are public protests, the council is at each other's throats, and now even the factory owners are causing trouble. There are riots, big and small, nearly every day, he said, pressing his fingers to his temple. Things are getting worse, and the department is stretched thin. Listening to the captain's complaints, Leo instinctively glanced at Evelyn. Coming from a noble family, she would have some insight into the current situation. Evelyn's expression turned grim. I heard things got heated in the Imperial Council this morning. It devolved into a full-blown brawl, all decorum forgotten. Seeing Leo listening intently, she continued. Because of the factory shutdowns, the new money industrialists are demanding a swift return to order. They want the army and police to use force to suppress the unrest. Leo nodded. Their entire fortunes were tied to the Magitech industry. If this continued, their wealth would evaporate. The thought of losing money was a fate worse than death for them. And the other side? Leo asked. The old aristocracy, Evelyn said. They were left behind in the new industrial boom, but they still have their ancestral lands and centuries of accumulated wealth. They're indifferent to the situation, and some are even enjoying it. Leo pondered this for a moment. Sounds like the world outside has really turned upside down. The once prosperous and stable city of Steam had become a hotbed of chaos and noise overnight. And the root cause was that single, massive explosion. Leo smelled a conspiracy. Whoever was behind this had a powerful motive. Evelyn, too, sensed something was amiss. After Captain Raymond's left, her deep green eyes immediately shifted back to Leo. The third prince. They both thought of him. He had orchestrated that catastrophic explosion to kill Ophelia. Leo met her gaze, and they both shook their heads in unison. He just doesn't seem like he has that kind of strategic depth, Leo mused. Could he have been used? Is there a larger conspiracy at play? Evelyn's expression was doubtful. It wasn't her first time seeing the third prince, but her most recent impression, from last week's rescue, was the most vivid. The man was grim and ruthless, but he still felt green. If he was truly leveraging this empire-wide chaos to advance some grand conspiracy, she would have to seriously reevaluate him. He doesn't seem like the type, Leo agreed with Evelyn. From the perspective of who stood to gain the most, the third prince didn't fit the profile of the mastermind. And besides, the Wigner Terror save point updated, Bedlam Asylum. Reloads remaining. 5/5, a new save point had appeared. Against this backdrop, Leo felt this chapter might be coming to a close. Leo had to admit, he just didn't rate the third prince. The guy was arrogant and domineering, hardly the material of the final boss. It was an instinctive analysis, based purely on his experience as a player of this game. He chatted with the two of them for a while longer, until visiting hours quietly came to an end. Helena looked at Leo, reluctant to leave. They'd barely had any time together, and for most of it, he had been analyzing the case with Evelyn, hardly paying any attention to her. A set of hurried footsteps echoed from the hallway, and the iron door was pulled open again. But to Leo's surprise, it wasn't the stoic guard. It was Ophelia smiling at him, and behind her, holding an exquisite fruit basket and an assortment of expensive supplements, was her headmaid, Carolyn. The moment they appeared, Helena and Evelyn shot to their feet. Leo, Ophelia walked over, her voice filled with concern and anxiety. These past few days, your recovery has. Before she could finish, Helena stepped directly in front of her, her eyes blazing with anger and hostility. Well, look who it is. You evil woman, she snarled. How dare you come here and bother my brother again? After Helena planted herself in front of Ophelia, her face a mask of rage, Leo's view was completely blocked. The joyful smile that had graced Ophelia's face upon seeing him slowly faded. She looked at Helena, her voice cool. Such a lack of manners. Is this how Leo raised you? Oomph. Why should I show you any manners? Helena glared, then pointed toward the door. Get out before I lose my temper and kill you. You're not welcome here. Insolent. Carolyn stepped forward, her expression furious. Commoner, do you know who you're speaking to? Her Highness had cut her recovery short just to see Leo, preparing gifts with a heart full of joy, only to be met with this disrespectful brat. Carolyn was ready to draw her casting weapon and teach the commoner a lesson. But Ophelia stopped her. Your Highness. Ophelia shook her head slightly. She didn't seem angry. In fact, a curious, knowing smile played on her lips. She looked the girl over, who seemed to be staking her territory, and said teasingly, Helena, it's been years. How is it you haven't matured at all? You can't hide a single emotion. Every thought is written on your face. So unladylike. Helena hated being talked down to like that. A surge of fury shot through her. Who says? Brother always compliments me. He says I've changed a lot. Helena glared at her, then quickly turned to Leo for validation. What could Leo say? He could only nod awkwardly. Ophelia, you don't know. Helena has grown up a lot. She's much more mature now. See? Brother is the best. Helena clung to Leo's arm affectionately, shooting a triumphant look at Ophelia. Did you hear that? Oh, Ophelia raised an eyebrow, sizing Helena up with renewed interest. You're a little taller, but as for your figure, she rubbed her smooth chin, her critique delivered with a viper's tongue. Still built like a bean sprout. If I were Leo, I wouldn't even bother looking twice. Helena froze. She glanced down at her own chest, then at Ophelia's. Her teeth began to grind together in a mix of fury and humiliation. The blow was fatal. Helena had always been self-conscious about her flat chest, especially since her brother seemed to have a preference for well-endowed figures like Evelyn's. She could change her shape, of course, but what wasn't hers wasn't hers. She couldn't maintain the mimic state forever. You. Helena trembled with rage, the words catching in her throat. But Ophelia's assault wasn't over. She saw the storm of emotions playing out on Helena's face, the rising tide of indignation. A look of disdain filled her pale eyes. Your personality has changed a bit, I'll grant you that. When you were a child, you disliked me, but you only dared to curse me behind my back. And now, she gave a scornful laugh. You actually dare to confront me head-on. What is this, your rebellious phase? Helena's face was a mask of murderous intent. Your mouth is just as venomous as ever. You haven't changed a bit. Thank you for the compliment. Ophelia replied with a serene smile. Seeing Helena's shoulders and arms begin to twist, Leo quickly stepped in and grabbed her, afraid she would lash out. If Ophelia had walked in here so brazenly, she must have come prepared. Leo shot Ophelia a disapproving look. She had to have known Helena would be here, and she must have anticipated this confrontation. As expected, Ophelia met his gaze with a sly, triumphant smile. She did it on purpose. Leo sighed and tried to calm Helena down. The outcome had been decided the moment their verbal sparring began. One was calm and composed, the other was shaking with rage. They weren't even in the same league. It reminded him of the old days after Ophelia had moved into the mansion. She had always acted as its mistress. She never gave a second thought to the timid, low-status Helena. In her eyes, Helena was more like a small pet she and Leo were raising together. And for that exact reason, Helena, who had always seen herself as Leo's sister, disliked her more than anyone. Ophelia was too dominant, always making her feel like her place was being usurped. As the temperature in the room plummeted and Helena continued to lose ground, Evelyn, who had been enjoying the show from the sidelines, finally decided she couldn't watch anymore. She cleared her throat and strode to the center of the battlefield. Excuse me, Your Highness, but for a guest, aren't you being a bit overbearing? All eyes turned to Evelyn. She met Ophelia's gaze levelly, a calm smile on her face. For a moment, her presence seemed to match that of the fifth princess of the empire. Leo couldn't describe the feeling in his heart. He looked at Professor Evelyn with immense gratitude, thinking that a reliable adult had finally arrived to save the day. A true hero's entrance. Go get her, Professor Evelyn. But in the next second, Ophelia's pale eyes drifted lazily toward her. She gave Evelyn a brief, dismissive glance. And who are you? Professor Evelyn was taken aback. Ophelia had asked the question so casually, her gaze already moving away as if Evelyn was completely beneath her notice. It completely threw Evelyn off her game. She had prepared a whole arsenal of witty comebacks for a 300-round verbal war, but she hadn't expected to be dismissed without so much as a proper look. And she was completely shut down by that one simple phrase. I'm. Just as she was about to explain who she was, she realized she'd lost her train of thought. Evelyn's beautiful brows furrowed. Wait, what does it matter who I am? She scoffed. In fact, you're the one with the most distant relationship to Leo in this room. As an outsider, what right do you have to lecture us? Seeing Professor Evelyn get riled up, Leo groaned internally. This is bad. Of course Ophelia knew who Evelyn was. She'd taken secret photos of him having dinner with her. This was all intentional. After Evelyn's accusation, Ophelia's indifferent, pale eyes slowly turned back to her, no longer ignoring her. Ophelia studied Evelyn's face, a thoughtful expression appearing. Oh, the Abraham family, isn't it? I believe I've seen you before. Oomph. Evelyn crossed her arms. As long as you know, you may be royalty, but you can't be so arrogant. With my family's power, we aren't afraid of. Before she could finish, Ophelia's voice drifted out, light as a feather. The fact that my father allows your family of vampires to even remain in the Imperial Council is a tremendous act of grace. For years, Father has been purging the anomaly-blooded families within the Empire. Even those ancient vampires in your family, who have lived for who knows how long, have had to pull in their claws and learn to behave. She gave a condescending, contemptuous smile. What? Are you trying to cause trouble for your family? You're just a broken house, begging for scraps. What gives you the right to speak to me like this? You. As if her weak spot had been struck, Evelyn began to tremble with emotion. Her face flushed with a mixture of indignation and anxiety. Finally, all the fight went out of her. Professor Evelyn, defeated. Seeing that she could gain no further ground verbally, Ophelia surveyed the room with the smile of a victor. Leo watched the arrogant princess, proud as a peacock, and didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Double kill. She's on a rampage. Whether in wit or status, Evelyn and Helena stood no chance. And in terms of actual power, the gap was likely even wider. Ophelia's sharp gaze softened as it landed on the embarrassed and uncomfortable Leo. She chuckled, then took the basket of fruit and supplements from Carolyn, intending to place them by Leo's bed. The movement brought her closer to him. We don't need your fake sincerity. Helena, like a wary guard dog, blocked her path again, her voice fierce. Get lost. Leave his place. And stop coming after my brother. Ophelia, stonewalled by Helena, still hadn't managed to exchange a single word with Leo. Her brow twitched almost imperceptibly as her eyes lowered. Leo, who knew her well, recognized the sign. Ophelia was about to lose her temper. Her gaze turned cold again. And why can't I come to see Leo? She looked genuinely puzzled. My lover is injured. Isn't it perfectly normal for me to visit him? What did you say? Helena's eyes went wide. You're being ridiculous. Ophelia ignored her, her gaze fixed on Leo. Her pale eyes were filled with an affectionate, loving light, the look of a normal girlfriend. Leo met that gaze, and his heart sank. This is bad. He quickly looked at Helena. Sure enough, Helena absolutely lost it. With a sickening cracking sound, killing intent flooded the room as 6 black tentacles shot out toward Ophelia. Yet Ophelia remained unmoved, her eyes still on Leo. She didn't even flinch, seemingly unconcerned by the threat. Leo's mind reeled. Something was wrong, very, very wrong. Suddenly, a chilling atmosphere descended upon the room. Leo's eyes darted to the narrow gap beneath the door, where twisted black shadows were seeping in. In an instant, shadow guards materialized in the room, forming a protective circle around Ophelia. They moved so fast that no one else had time to react. Beyond that, Jason, the leader of the shadow guards, was already lunging at Helena from behind, a dagger in his hand. Wait! Leo shouted, trying to stop him. He shoved Helena out of the way. It was sudden, but Helena's reflexes were just as fast. As the dagger changed course and came for her again, her 6 tentacles snapped back, coiling around her to form a protective shield. The sound of metal striking a hard surface echoed dully in the air. His attack thwarted, Jason's expression showed a hint of surprise. He then flickered out of sight, reappearing beside Ophelia with the other guards. The sudden, deadly intent of the attack turned Evelyn's face grim. She glared toward the iron door and yelled, Hey, where are the guards? Where's the BSI? Breaking into a high-security ward in broad daylight. Is there no law in this city? Aren't you going to do something about this? She shot a furious look at Ophelia, hoping to knock her down a peg and regain some ground. But after a moment, the only response was silence. Evelyn frowned. What's going on? Where is everyone? Ophelia let out a cold laugh. Did you not know that I was once the acting head of the P5I? She glanced at Evelyn with contempt. The men outside are mine. What? Evelyn looked at Leo for confirmation. Leo nodded awkwardly. It was true. Evelyn stood there, flustered. She hadn't known. She'd been away from her family for too long. Jason, Ophelia said softly to her shadow guard leader. You may stand down. You are not needed here. Jason nodded immediately. Then, as everyone watched, the air shimmered strangely and the shadows dissipated. The shadow guards vanished right before their eyes. Evelyn narrowed her eyes. The skill of these guards was beyond her expectations. She hadn't realized the out-of-favor fifth princess had such formidable subordinates. She had truly underestimated her. Ophelia, Leo said wearily, stop messing around. Can we get to the point? It seemed like she had come here just to pick a fight, to assert her dominance over the other women. But Leo knew her well enough to know her time was too precious to waste on people she didn't care about. She had to have a reason for being here. As expected, Ophelia smiled at him. The moment their eyes met, everything was understood. Helena shot her brother a resentful look and tightened her grip on his sleeve. I'll make this quick, Ophelia said, her gaze sweeping over everyone, ensuring she was the center of attention. I can get Leo out of here. Everyone stared at her in shock. Their expressions brought a satisfied smile to Ophelia's face. She continued, unhurried. You all know what's happening outside. The situation is getting worse. It's clear that someone is using this incident to sow chaos. Therefore, catching the culprit is now meaningless. My father has already declared the matter closed. The cult of truth is responsible. I've already spoken with the P5I. Leo will be released today. At this, Helena and Evelyn both breathed a sigh of relief. Ophelia looked at Leo, then shot a glance at the other two. If it weren't for Leo, I wouldn't have bothered wasting my breath on you. Seeing her high and mighty attitude, Helena felt a mix of anger and sadness. She squeezed Leo's hand tighter. She was sad because she had been completely useless to her brother in this whole affair, while the woman she hated most had solved the problem with such casual ease. Helena lowered her head, a sense of panic creeping into her heart. I'm so useless. Completely useless. If this keeps up, she's really going to steal him away. Helena, Leo looked at her, concerned. Her grip on his hand was getting tighter, but she remained silent, her head bowed in thought. Suddenly, Helena looked up. Her small face was set with determination, as if she had made a momentous decision. She leaned in and whispered in Leo's ear. Brother, I want to go home. Leo's eyes widened in surprise. Helena nodded firmly. Yes, home. No matter how much she feared the presence behind that old mansion, at this moment, she couldn't afford to think about that. The vampire had already been contained by her brother. If that detestable woman got to him first, she would go insane. And besides, she was filled with regret and self-blame over what had happened. Her brother lacked power. If he had the strength and abilities he'd possessed 4 years ago, he wouldn't be tormented by someone like Ophelia. But she had been too selfish, too unwilling to return to that mansion. So, she had to become useful to her brother. With that thought, Helena shot a triumphant look at the woman she despised. So what if you have power and status? You've never once thought about what's best for my brother. Not like me. I only care about my brother. After filling out the discharge paperwork, Leo finally left Bedlam Asylum. Ophelia's black carriage was already waiting downstairs. This time, she wasn't trying to drag him off to some strange place. She was personally escorting him home. Oomph. Helena eyed the luxurious royal carriage with disdain, then glanced at Ophelia, who was speaking with Leo. Always showing off in front of my brother. It's not like we can't afford to get a ride home. Evelyn looked at Helena's sour expression, knowing the girl was getting jealous again. Public transport has been completely shut down. You couldn't get a ride now, even if you had the money. She shook her head, gazing at the empty streets. Besides, the city is a mess right now. Her royal carriage is the safest option. Evelyn had a point. Helena could only nod reluctantly. Fine, you're right. They climbed into the spacious carriage. With a crack of the whip, the carriage set off at a brisk pace toward their home in the West End. Inside, four pairs of eyes met in silence. Helena clung to Leo's arm affectionately, sitting to his right. To his left sat the calm and collected Ophelia. Carolyn and Evelyn were squeezed onto the opposite seat. Evelyn didn't seem to mind. In fact, she watched the flustered Leo with an increasingly amused smile. Feeling the gentle rocking of the carriage and the unnervingly quiet atmosphere, Leo felt a bit awkward. The carriage was spacious, but it was still an enclosed space. As long as his eyes were open, his gaze was bound to cross with someone else's. Two groups that had just been at each other's throats were now sitting together in silence, exchanging meaningful glances. Leo felt like he could write an entire stream of consciousness novel about it. Just then, he felt Ophelia on his left leaning in slightly. A cool, pleasant floral scent wafted over. She rubbed her temples wearily, as if she intended to rest her head on his shoulder and sleep, just like she used to. Helena's eyes flashed with murderous intent. Evelyn's smile was on the verge of breaking into a full-blown grin. Leo shot a pleading look at Professor Evelyn, who seemed to be enjoying the drama far too much. She blinked innocently, a smile playing on her lips, clearly unwilling to intervene. Leo's eyes narrowed dangerously, and he slowly raised his hand. The moment she saw his hand move, Evelyn flinched like a startled cat. A flood of embarrassing and blush-inducing memories rushed through her mind. He's threatening me with a command again. She shot him a look of mingled contempt and annoyance, then threw open the window. A blast of cold air rushed in, making everyone shiver. "Oh, it's getting foggy," Evelyn said, trying to change the subject for Leo's sake. But what she saw outside surprised her. The entirety of New Haven was shrouded in a thick fog. Perhaps because the factories had all shut down, the air was moist and fresh. Of course, this kind of weather wasn't unusual for the city. What startled her was the atmosphere on the streets. Through the white haze, she could see patrol after patrol of heavily armed military police marching through the streets of the West End, their boots striking the pavement with a grim, rhythmic beat. Farther in the distance, she couldn't see clearly, only a chaotic mass of figures. The sound of harsh, guttural screams drifted from that direction, human voices that sounded monstrous. Everyone in the carriage turned to look out the window. Ophelia's pale eyes instantly shifted to red, her pupils becoming reptilian slits that seemed to pierce through the layers of fog. A moment later, she frowned and looked at Leo. "A few supernaturals have gone berserk. The army and the order are suppressing them." Leo nodded. He could feel a faint psychic assault, a sinister and crazed aura that reached them even from this distance. Berserk supernaturals, and so many of them on the streets. It was a terrible omen. Leo looked at the pensive Ophelia. "What do you make of it?" Ophelia's brow furrowed slightly. "The number of crazies on the streets has been increasing these past few days. The situation in the city is getting more chaotic. The authorities can barely keep it contained." "This is not a good sign," Evelyn murmured, looking out the window with concern. "A supernatural is only one step away from becoming a monster to be feared." Ophelia looked at Leo seriously. "Someone is deliberately spreading chaos. But chaos is the means, not the end." Leo met her gaze and nodded silently. Chaos is the cradle of the unspeakable. A sense of an impending storm washed over him. The once prosperous and stable city of steam. Something terrible was about to happen. The carriage continued its swift journey westward. Being a royal carriage, it faced no obstructions. The closer they got to the edge of the city, the worse the chaos became. Leo noticed members of the Order of the Holy Edict in their silver-white armor suppressing another group of crazed supernaturals. He even spotted a familiar face. A young man in the most ornate armor was directing the scene. It was the third prince, whom he had just seen a week ago. Under his command, the knights fanned out in a disciplined formation, surrounding a crazed supernatural from a distance. The creature was no longer human, its body massive and covered in black fur, with two large canines protruding from its mouth. It was crouched on the ground, gnawing on the mangled corpse of a knight, its fangs easily piercing through the knight's armor. It seemed to have lost all reason, driven only by the urge to kill and consume, with no intention of fleeing. The knights raised their double-barreled shotguns, and a dense volley of fire rained down on it. The creature was blown to pieces, physically purified. But their danger wasn't over. The fog was too thick. A sudden roar echoed out, and another madman, hidden in the mist, charged out. It lunged straight for the third prince's back. The prince heard the sound and instinctively turned. But before he could raise his gun or sword, the confidant who was always by his side had already dealt with the threat. Leo noted that while the confidant carried the standard-issue crossguard longsword of the Order, he was actually a caster. He merely stared coldly at the monster, muttering a quick incantation. The creature's body began to contort grotesquely before exploding in mid-air into a shower of foul-smelling gore. The black carriage passed by the third prince's men. Evelyn quickly drew the window curtain. Too bad it didn't get that annoying jerk, she grumbled. Ophelia smiled faintly. He and I have been clashing for years. If it were that easy, he'd have been a corpse long ago. Leo nodded silently. He didn't know the extent of the third prince's own power, but his confidant was clearly formidable. Like Ophelia's Carolyn, he was a caster, but he seemed much stronger. To have held his own against Ophelia for so many years, the third prince and his faction were not to be underestimated. After the knights finally dispatched the crazed supernaturals, the confidant stood protectively by the third prince's side. Your Highness. I'm fine. The third prince waved him off, his sharp gaze fixed on the black carriage speeding down the street. He followed its retreating form until it disappeared. That's my sister's carriage, and it's heading toward the West End. He frowned thoughtfully. That man, Leo, has been released? It would seem so. The confidant replied immediately. Leo Sterling lives on Riverfront Road in the West End. That is indeed the right direction. The third prince nodded slightly. After we're done here, send someone to keep an eye on him. The confidant hesitated. But Your Highness, His Majesty assigned us to downtown to wipe out the remnants of the cult of truth. Our manpower. The third prince turned to his confidant, his expression impassive, his gaze cold. Raoul, since when do you question my orders? Raoul immediately bowed his head. My apologies, Your Highness. I will see to it at once. The black carriage slowly pulled to a stop outside the old mansion. Everyone disembarked. Leo looked around. The fog wasn't as thick here as it was in the city center, but the streets were deserted. Every house was shuttered, doors and windows tightly sealed. A palpable sense of unease hung over the city. Ophelia bid a reluctant farewell to Leo. It's too dangerous outside. Stay in the mansion. Don't come out. Leo smiled and nodded. And her worried frown never eased. I have a feeling something bad is about to happen. But whatever it is, you must not get involved like you did before. She gripped his hand, her voice urgent with concern. Please listen to me. Stop investigating these dangerous things. Whether people live or die has nothing to do with you. Leo looked at her, exasperated. He wanted nothing more than to stay out of it, but the system quests wouldn't let him. But faced with Ophelia's gentle and earnest pleading, he could only nod against his better judgment. I know. You should get back to the palace. It's the safest place. You're lying. Her pale eyes turned cold as she stared into his. I'm really not going to go wandering around. Why don't you believe me? Leo said helplessly. Ophelia gave a smile that was both scolding and resigned. Come on, I know you too well. You think you can hide what you're thinking from me? Leo just smiled wryly. She was right. When it came to reading people, Ophelia was a grandmaster. I know that even if I say this, you won't listen. Ophelia tightened her grip on his hand. But if you run into trouble, don't rush in head first. You have to tell me first. We'll face it together. Leo looked at her and nodded firmly. Okay, I'll listen to you. This time he wasn't lying. Then I'll be going. She reluctantly let go of his hand. I have matters at the palace to attend to. I need to report to my father. As soon as I'm done with all the trivial things, I'll come back for you. Ophelia's gaze swept over Helena and Evelyn in the distance before she stepped back into the carriage. Through the window, her eyes burned into Leo's. Remember what I said? Leo waved as the black carriage gradually disappeared from view, swallowed by the distant fog. After she was gone, Helena finally let go of her resentful glare. She watched as Evelyn went to unlock the front door with a key and took a deep breath. Are you sure about this? Evelyn looked back at her with a grin. Once you go in, there's no turning back. Thinking about everything she had seen on their way here, even Helena, who usually didn't care for such major events, couldn't help but feel a sense of dread. Yes. She clenched her fists and stepped through the door without hesitation. Leo watched them go in, then followed. The moment he entered the living room, a system notification popped up. The Wigner Terror End Save Point. Riverfront Road. The old mansion reloads remaining. May 5th, as the final moments of the chapter arrived, Leo felt a knot of tension form in his stomach. He instinctively looked at Helena, who was sitting obediently on the sofa, and thought to himself, just as I figured, supplies before the boss fight. After containing Helena, his power would undoubtedly rise to a new level. He would have a bit more confidence to face the unknown dangers ahead. Meeting her clear blue eyes, Leo said softly, let's begin. Helena nodded, anxious and fidgety. Okay, brother, I'm ready. In his mind, Leo issued the command, contain. As the thought formed, the entire mansion began to change. The floor rumbled, doors and windows flew open and slammed shut, and a cold wind howled through the hall. It was like a haunted house caught in a violent storm. Evelyn had been unconscious the last time Leo had performed a containment, so she watched the events unfold with curiosity. It was a terrifying, bone-chilling power, and its source was now Leo. She watched him nervously, feeling as if he had become something that transcended the world. But the most nervous person was Helena. She sat on the sofa, as if on pins and needles, her brother's cold, unrelenting power scanning her body, seemingly seeing through her very essence. Leo stared impassively at the data stream on his interface. Helena affinity, 100 corruption level, 20 containment in progress. The seconds ticked by. After a dozen or so, the shaking of the mansion finally stopped. Containment check successful. A smile finally broke through on Leo's face. On the sofa, Helena let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding and wiped a bead of cold sweat from her brow. Anomalous entity 002 Helena 002 will be assigned room 102 on the first floor. You may use strict confinement protocols to reduce the entity's corruption level and lower its threat. The Sanctuary Warden is responsible for the supervision of all contained entities and their actions. To maintain world stability and ensure its return to normal operation, please continue your efforts. Upon successful containment, the Sanctuary Warden will acquire the entity's base talents. Lesser Mythos creature, Shoggoth amorphous body, rapid cellular division to alter physical structure and form. Note, activation will temporarily reduce constitution and agility stats. Psychic assault unleashes a powerful mental shock, can reduce sanity by 5 to 10 points /SEC. Note, effects vary between species, most effective against humans. After recontaining Helena, Leo sank onto the sofa and let out a long sigh. Seeing his weary expression, Helena quickly asked, "Brother, are you not feeling well?" Leo smiled and patted her head. "I'm fine, just thinking about some things." Thinking about things? Her blue eyes widened in confusion. Leo just smiled and didn't elaborate. He was just feeling a bit sentimental. The moment the containment succeeded, he'd had a strange sense of déjà vu. The memories of being hunted by Helena when he first arrived in this world were still vivid. Only now had that chapter truly closed. It made him realize just how long he'd been here. From the initial fear and resistance to now, he felt like he had truly become a part of this world. He was no longer just playing a role. He had become, in every sense, Leo Sterling. The thought brought another wistful smile to his face. He was so lost in thought that he didn't even notice Professor Evelyn holding a grilled sausage to his lips. "Here, stop smiling like an idiot and eat something." "Huh, you made this." Leo took the sausage in shock. It wasn't a charred lump, but perfectly crispy on the outside, emitting the distinct, smoky aroma of cured meat. Professor Evelyn could cook. "What's with the surprised look?" Evelyn said, annoyed. "If you're not going to eat it, give it back. Don't waste my kindness." Leo glanced instinctively at the flickering light in the kitchen and realized she really had made it. "I'll eat it. Of course I'll eat it." He snatched the sausage back. "This is a home-cooked meal for my dear professor. What a rare treat." He took a bite with a grin. It was just heating something up, but considering she'd nearly destroyed the kitchen last time, this was incredible progress. "Oomph. Do you think something as simple as cooking could possibly stump someone as brilliant as me?" Evelyn laughed smugly. Helena, however, watched Leo eat the sausage and gave a scornful smile. "As a vampire, hiding at home eating snacks and human food all day, aren't you afraid your family would laugh at you if they found out?" Evelyn shot her a look. "What's wrong with human food? Human food is delicious." It was only recently that she'd had the epiphany. The food humans ate was so varied, so interesting, so tasty. She felt like she had wasted all her previous years. And it was all thanks to Leo. Although she still resented him for containing her, he had unknowingly opened a door to a new world for her. She couldn't wait to enjoy all the things her former bloodkin self couldn't. She even wanted to go sunbathe on a southern beach. All the wealthy people in New Haven went there. It must be an incredibly enjoyable, incredibly comfortable experience. At the thought, she looked at Leo eagerly. "Leo, I want to go on a beach vacation, to that place you told me about." Leo smiled at her. All right, but," he added, his tone serious, "we have to take care of things in New Haven first. Once everything is over, I'll take you all on vacation." "Leo, you're the best." Evelyn threw herself at him in excitement. Oof! The professor's impressive assets instantly smothered his face, nearly suffocating him. "Professor, why are you so big? Get off. Can't breathe." Seeing the two of them in such an intimate position, Helena couldn't take it anymore. Vampire. It was her first day back home, And this damn vampire dared to flirt with her brother right in front of her. So brazen. If she didn't teach her a lesson now, who knew how much worse she would get? Helena's face was contorted with rage as she used her tentacles to yank Evelyn off Leo, nearly flinging her across the room. Leo gasped for air, relieved. Evelyn glared at Helena, annoyed. What's your problem? Can't I express my happiness? She then glanced at Leo. Besides, look at him. He was clearly enjoying it. Vampire. Helena clenched her fists, her teeth grinding. It's bloodkin, not vampire. Evelyn was unusually insistent on this point. What's wrong with calling you a vampire? Helena frowned. Isn't that what everyone calls you? Evelyn snorted. Those are just ignorant rumors spread by country bumpkins. Why should we, the noble bloodkin, be relegated to the same category as ghouls and the like? I'll call you a vampire. Vampire, vampire, vampire. Arg, you tentacle monster. Seeing that the two were about to come to blows, Leo quietly slipped into the kitchen to give them some space. The sausage is too salty. I could use some juice. Oh, is that beer? Sipping his beer, he watched the battle on the sofa. They were getting along great, already at each other's throats. The new sofa was starting to crack again. Leo thought to himself that this harmonious and cozy scene would probably become their new normal. What a headache. The first day of the new housemate Helena's return passed quietly. The next morning, the three of them sat around the dining table for breakfast. While eating the fried eggs Helena had made, Leo frowned at the weather outside. A thick layer of gray clouds blanketed New Haven, and the fog had not dissipated. The weather had been getting worse each day, the whole world feeling gloomy and oppressive, just like the situation in the city. Thought soured his mood. Leo looked at Helena. Go check all the doors and windows. Except for the main entrance. Lock everything that can be locked. Helena didn't ask why. She got up immediately. I'll go right now. Evelyn put down her half-finished glass of milk and looked at Leo. Are you worried something might happen here? Leo nodded. Evelyn wasn't too concerned. We're so far out of the way, and there aren't many people around. Do you really think the chaos in the city will spread all the way out here? Leo sighed. I hope I'm just being paranoid. It'd be best if you're right. As they sat in silence, their quiet breakfast was shattered by a series of frantic, heavy pounds on the door. Bang, bang, bang. The sound was immense. Leo and Evelyn shot to their feet, their eyes fixed on the entrance. Crimson blades of blood magic materialized in both their hands. Speak of the devil. Evelyn frowned, her figure blurring as she instantly appeared by the front door. Leo was right behind her. The pounding continued again and again. But strangely, each blow seemed weaker than the last. Leo and Evelyn exchanged a confused look. This didn't seem like a crazed monster trying to break in. Who is it? Leo called out. To his surprise, a familiar voice answered from outside. Leo, open the door. It's me. Hurry, open up. Leo was stunned. He immediately threw the door open. Standing, or rather, leaning, outside were Captain Raymond's and his young subordinate, Officer Leon. Both men were covered in blood, propping each other up. As the door swung open, they stumbled and collapsed inside. Captain! Leo rushed to help him up, only to find that Raymond's didn't even have the strength to stand. Captain, what happened? Evelyn was equally shocked. What are you two doing here? The captain struggled to lift his head, his eyes darting nervously behind him. First, close the door. Is something following you? Evelyn quickly scanned the area outside, but the thick fog obscured her vision. Only after she had securely locked the door did Captain Raymond's let out a shuddering sigh of relief. Leo was about to ask what had happened, but before Raymond's could speak, his subordinate shot up. His eyes were bloodshot, his entire being radiating sheer terror. He screamed like a madman. They're crazy. They're all crazy. Get out of here. Get out of New Haven. Chapter 119. After his frantic shout, Officer Leon seemed to have expended all his energy. He collapsed to the floor and passed out cold. Leo watched in shock. What could have happened to terrify the young officer so completely? He turned his attention back to Captain Raymond's, whose condition was no better. His face was drawn with extreme exhaustion and devoid of color. His uniform shirt was almost completely soaked in blood, which had already formed a small pool on the floor in the short time he'd been lying there. Captain, what the hell happened? Why did he say to leave New Haven? Leo asked, simultaneously checking his injuries. He had multiple wounds. Tearing away the cloth around them, Leo saw what looked like deep claw marks, as if from an animal. They weren't wide, but they were deep enough to expose bone. Looking at the nonstop bleeding, Leo couldn't imagine how the two of them had made it this far. Evelyn vanished and reappeared a moment later with a first aid kit. It's shock from massive blood loss. She was the expert here, quickly taking out hemostatic bandages and antiseptic. Our resources here are limited. To save him, we'll need to get him to a hospital for proper treatment. Can't go back. Captain Raymond's voice was sharp with panic. The movement pulled at his wounds, and he let out a pained hiss. Stay away from the city. Stay away from downtown. Leo, listen to me. Those things are everywhere, and they track by scent like bloodhounds. They'll be here any minute. Leo frowned. Who's hunting you? The cult. Raymond's voice was raspy. Everyone is dead. I was the only one who got away with him. The cult. Leo asked, confused. The cult of truth. Captain Raymond's nodded. Leo was taken aback. He knew the cult of truth situation. Under a joint offensive from official forces, the once notorious organization had been reduced to scattered fugitives, either dead or on the run. Although the remaining members were hiding in the complex labyrinth of downtown, Leo had assumed cleaning them up was just a matter of time. He never imagined it would come to this. The captain said only the two of them escaped. Did that mean all the P5.I supernaturals were dead too? Did the cult of truth have that kind of power? Captain Raymond's gripped Leo's arm, his voice desperate. When we went in to raid them, the madmen were performing a ritual. I don't know what they did, but all the supernaturals on my team went insane. They started attacking everyone, friend and foe alike, killing each other, slaughtering everyone. They all went mad. His voice grew weaker, but he pushed on, determined to relay the critical information so Leo would be prepared. And the cultists are crazy too. They chased us all the way here. They climbed onto my car, their claws tore through metal. You have to be careful. Those things are fast. They don't feel pain. Guns can't kill them. Having relayed his message, Captain Raymond's finally succumbed and passed out. Leo sighed and helped move him and his subordinate to the sofa. Evelyn had heard everything the captain said. She was now staring warily out the window, her nose twitching slightly. It seems the captain was telling the truth. I can smell it. A very strong scent of blood. Brother. Helena suddenly came running down from upstairs. You have to see this. There are so many people outside. So many strange people. Leo and Evelyn's hearts sank. The three of them rushed to the upstairs balcony. Looking down, they saw them. Through the thick fog, countless dark figures were visible, closing in on the mansion from all directions. Brother, what are those things? Helena asked, her voice laced with shock. Members of the cult of truth. They've been turned into monsters, Leo said, carefully surveying the mansion's perimeter. Fortunately, he'd had Helena lock all the doors and windows earlier. If they wanted to get in, their only option was the open-air balcony. Evelyn looked down at the seemingly endless stream of monsters emerging from the fog. There are so many of them. By now, dozens of creatures had reached the front gate, allowing Leo to get a closer look. They still had human forms, but their clothes were tattered, revealing matted fur underneath. Their teeth and claws were sharp, and their eyes were milky, sightless white. They seemed to possess no intelligence, only letting out animalistic snarls as they slammed their bodies against the front door. They reminded Leo of zombies, except these things could run alarmingly fast. Hearing the tremors from downstairs, Evelyn frowned at Leo. Should we reinforce the doors and windows? Do you think they can break through? Leo and Helena, however, were completely unconcerned. They both knew how formidable the old mansion was. They can't get in, Helena said simply. Leo nodded at Evelyn. Don't worry. Forget them. You could hit this place with a naval cannon, and it wouldn't leave a scratch. The sanctuary was a fundamental game mechanic. It might get dirty or dusty, but it was indestructible. So, even though their numbers were daunting, Leo wasn't particularly worried. All right, Evelyn said, trusting their confidence. The pounding downstairs grew more violent as the horde of monsters surrounded the ground floor, unable to advance. After some time, the creature's low intelligence finally led them to spot the three figures on the roof. They began to shriek, climbing over one another like ants to reach them. The first monster to scramble up came face to face with Evelyn. How ugly, she remarked. Evelyn detested ugliness. With a flash of blood-red light, the creature's hideous head went flying through the air. Helena joined the fray, the tips of her tentacles morphing into sharp blades. With a single horizontal sweep, she decapitated an entire row of monsters. Seeing how efficient Helena's tentacles were, Evelyn let out a disdainful snort. Her crimson blade instantly transformed into a massive, blood-red scythe. She leaped from the roof, fearlessly plunging into the black tide of monsters below. Leo had to admit, Having lived for who knows how many years, Professor Evelyn's combat skills were far superior to Helena's. Each swing of her scythe was like a giant, bloody crescent moon. She moved with an ethereal grace, weaving through the enemy ranks. The monsters, though fast, couldn't even touch the hem of her clothes. Leo watched her from the roof. In the midst of the slaughter, she was like a different person. A faint smile played on her lips. Bathed in a sanguine mist, she was a poisonous rose blooming from a field of crimson, beautiful and deadly. Evelyn was perfectly suited for her free attack mode, while Leo and Helena fell back into their familiar command mode. Standing at the highest point of the mansion with a clear view, Leo marked target after target for Helena, just as they had fought side by side in the past. When the combat turn began, their connection was so seamless they moved as one. Helena didn't need to think. She simply followed Leo's marks, each thrusting tentacle piercing a monster's head with unerring accuracy. From start to finish, Helena barely moved from her spot. Not a single one of the numerous monsters managed to reach the balcony or get inside the mansion. About 20 minutes later, the horrible screeching from below finally ceased. Leo scanned the distant fog. No new monsters were coming. Chapter 120. When the battle was finally over, the ground around the mansion, the entrance, the yard, the roof, was littered with the mangled corpses of the monsters. The air was thick with a nauseating stench of blood. The formidable horde that had chased Captain Raymond's across the city had been completely and utterly annihilated, mowed down by the trio like they were cutting grass. The power gap between supernaturals and ordinary people was an insurmountable chasm. The massive blood scythe vanished from Evelyn's hand. She scanned the area, and upon seeing no living monsters, she clicked her tongue, seemingly disappointed the fight was over so soon. "Professor, you've got a bit of a bloodthirsty streak," Leo said, feeling like he was meeting her for the first time. "I can't help it," Evelyn shrugged. "Ever since I integrated into the human world, I've been cooped up in a school, being a law-abiding citizen. I can't even remember the last time I let loose like this." "You should probably rein it in a little," Leo said, glancing at her character panel. Her corruption level had visibly ticked up. When killing becomes a habit, supernaturals often face an uncontrollable backlash. The most experienced ones always made a point to control their power, using it sparingly. "Didn't expect you to be so strong," Helena said, looking from the field of corpses to Evelyn. Initially, she'd felt a competitive urge, but even with her brother's support, her kill rate hadn't matched Evelyn's. The vampire's combat instincts were far more impressive than she'd imagined. Of course, Evelyn beamed with pride. This is combat experience built up over many, many years. I was the prodigy of my family ages ago. You two are still just kids." Leo chuckled, watching the praise go straight to Evelyn's head. He asked teasingly, "Professor, you're always talking about how amazing you were ages ago. So just how old are you exactly?" The color drained from Evelyn's face. "What did you say?" she asked, her eyes narrowing dangerously. Leo blinked innocently. "I was just curious. Are you angry, Professor?" Helena, delighted to see Evelyn squirm, chimed in with a grin. "They say the older a woman gets, the more reluctant she is to reveal her true age." "Were you calling old?" Evelyn exploded, the crimson blade reappearing in her hand. "Easy, easy," Leo said, trying to placate the bristling professor with a laugh. "I was just asking out of concern, no other reason. Don't take it to heart." Evelyn shot him an annoyed glare, then finally answered his question. 24. Leo paused. "I thought you were 26. "All right." Evelyn quickly corrected herself. 26, it's 26. I misremembered." Seeing her flustered state, Helena burst out laughing. "Ha ha ha. You can't even remember the age you made up." She twisted the knife. "They say memory is the first thing to go when you get old." A long, heavy silence fell. Leo felt the temperature around the mansion drop, and he couldn't help but shiver. After the Battle of the Mansion, the three returned to the living room. Captain Raymond's and Officer Leon were still unconscious on the sofa, their conditions worsening. Even with all the commotion outside, they hadn't stirred. Evelyn checked on them and sighed. If what the captain said is true, with so many powerful supernaturals running wild on the streets, the situation in the city is probably far worse than it is here. "We can't even take them to a hospital now." The implication was clear. The two men were likely not going to make it. Leo shook his head. "You're overthinking it, Professor. Even if you and I were to die, the captain would probably be fine." Evelyn smiled sadly, thinking Leo was in denial about losing his old friend. "I hope so." The recent battle and the confusing situation in the city cast a pall over the room. These insane cultists. What are they trying to accomplish? Evelyn wondered aloud, her brow furrowed in thought. Leo was just as confused. The whole incident started with the airship bombing. He'd initially thought the cult was just a scapegoat, a convenient distraction created by the old king to divert public attention. He never expected them to lash out and throw the entire city into chaos. The airship bombing, the public panic, the supernaturals going inexplicably insane. Leo muttered to himself, his thoughts racing. The third prince, Ophelia, the cult, the new money industrialists, and the old aristocracy, all these factions tangled together. His mind worked furiously, trying to piece together the fragments of the puzzle. Conflict everywhere, chaos everywhere. New Haven is like a powder keg about to explode. Chaos. Chaos. That's it. Chaos. It's the one constant theme. Just as Ophelia said, someone is deliberately creating chaos. Chaos is the means, not the end. Evelyn watched Leo's self-muttering with concern, worried he was losing his mind. She was about to interrupt when Helena stopped her. Helena shook her head slightly. She watched her brother, lost in thought, and put a finger to her lips. Chill. Don't disturb him. Evelyn gave a soft "oh." She remembered how Leo had unmasked her as a killer. He did possess a sharp, insightful mind. She watched him with a flicker of anticipation, hoping he could figure something out. Finally, Leo's muttering stopped, and his expression grew grim. He looked at them. We all know that chaos is the cradle of the unspeakable. The mastermind isn't trying to appease some ineffable being, are they? They're not trying to summon a dark god. Leo desperately hoped this wasn't the case. This was only the second chapter. Was he really going to have to face a god? What would the later chapters be like? Evelyn recalled the intel from Captain Raymond's. He said when they went in to raid them, the cultists were performing a ritual. You don't think they were? Helena grew nervous. Is that the cult of Truth's goal? They want to summon the god they worship. Leo shook his head definitively. I don't know which god the mastermind wants to summon, but the mastermind is definitely not the cult of Truth. Helena looked at him, confused. Why are you so sure it's not them, brother? Leo pointed to a newspaper on the coffee table and smiled. The professor and I have been studying these guys for a while. They've been active in downtown New Haven for a long time, so there's information on them. And the professor used to operate in that area, so she's dealt with them directly and knows them well. He looked at Evelyn. Evelyn nodded and gave him a merciless assessment. They're a bunch of losers. Huh? Helena blinked in surprise. Evelyn explained, they're just a black magic organization that got branded as a cult. They got their start selling and manufacturing drugs, then slapped on some half-baked religious doctrine to scam money out of poor, ignorant believers. Leo nodded. A group like that, hunted down like dogs, somehow manages to make all the government's powerful supernaturals go insane. If they had that kind of power from the start, how did they ever end up in this situation? Something was definitely wrong. But now Leo had a lead. He stood up and went to the door to get his coat. Brother, where are you going? Helena asked quickly. Back to Bedlam Asylum, Leo said, looking at them both. You two are coming with me. To that madhouse? Helena questioned. Why there? Leo explained, to visit my downstairs neighbor. He's a high-ranking member of the Cult of Truth. The one who is singing and praying under your room every night. The creepy one. Evelyn vaguely remembered him. That's the one. Leo had put on his coat and a flat cap. But brother, didn't you say the mastermind wasn't them? Helena was even more confused. It's not them, but we might be able to get some clues out of him, Leo said, his gaze drifting to the thick fog outside the window. The public panic had spread to all the major cities in the Empire, but the mass insanity among supernaturals was unique to New Haven. And the sudden, thick fog had appeared at almost the exact same time as the supernatural mutations. He couldn't help but see a connection. After leaving the old mansion, the emergency forced Leo, Helena, and Evelyn to run to a neighbor's house across the street and borrow a car with decent horsepower. When they heard Leo wanted to borrow their car, the neighbor was surprisingly agreeable. Of course, the main reason for their cooperation was the fully loaded revolver Leo was holding. Once the three were inside, Professor Evelyn took the wheel and the car sped toward the city center. Leo kept his eyes on the scene outside the window. The closer they got to the city, the more chaotic the streets became. He'd lost count of how many scenes of brazen looting he'd witnessed. Gunshots, riots, and curses filled the air. The entire city of New Haven was sliding toward the edge of total collapse. The atmosphere inside the car grew quiet. Helena squeezed his hand tightly, and he could feel the girl's anxiety radiating from her grip. Leo looked into her worried blue eyes and gently stroked her hair. Don't worry. Once your big brother saves New Haven, this will all be over. He smiled, trying to sound casual. And don't forget, I promised I'd take you both on a vacation to the coast when this is done. From the driver's seat, Professor Evelyn, though focused on the road, couldn't help but smile. That's right. This is nothing. I've seen this city through a war, you know. War is far more terrifying than this little mess. Helena didn't seem to hear her. She just looked at Leo, her expression filled with dread. Brother, maybe we shouldn't go. We should listen to Captain Raymond's and the others and just leave the city. Leo just smiled and shook his head, saying nothing more. But that's a malevolent deity. Helena pleaded. Are we really going to make an enemy of something like that? The more she thought about it, the more anxious she became. She had never imagined her family would get entangled in something so monumental. She didn't want her brother to be a hero. She didn't want him risking his life to save the city. All she wanted was to live quietly with him, to see him every day. That was enough. Leo had hoped to lighten the mood, but Helena's spiraling anxiety only made the silence in the car heavier. He sighed and went back to watching the chaos unfold outside. They had reached the east end of New Haven. The fog here was even thicker, visibility dropping to almost nothing. Leo could barely see 30 feet ahead. From within the mist came the occasional, wretched shriek of a crazed anomaly wandering the streets. Professor Evelyn glanced back. Leo, you said before that you thought this fog was connected to the anomalies going crazy? Leo nodded. This mass insanity is only happening in New Haven. When I was bored in the hospital, I read in the paper that the city was hit with a fog the likes of which we haven't seen in a decade. The timing was a perfect match, so I connected the two. Your mind certainly jumps around, Evelyn murmured. I never would have made that connection. After all, in the city of smog, a little fog is hardly unusual. She thought for a moment, her brow furrowing. But what could be the link between the fog and people losing their minds? Could the fog itself possess some kind of mysterious power to control people? If that's the case, the one behind this is terrifyingly powerful. An ability like that is unheard of. Leo frowned. It was true. He'd never heard of any magic or dark sorcery powerful enough to conjure a fog that could affect an entire city. This was supposed to be a low-magic world, after all. As they discussed it, Evelyn mused aloud, I wonder, should I test it? Without waiting for Leo's approval, she quickly rolled the window down a crack. A damp, heavy mist immediately seeped into the car. Evelyn took a deep breath, then slowly rolled the window back up. Leo and Helena stared at her, waiting for a reaction. After a long moment, Evelyn seemed perfectly fine. She looked at Leo in the rearview mirror. See? Nothing. Do I look like I'm about to go insane? Helena glared at her. You're so reckless. You knew the fog could be dangerous, and you did that anyway. It's one thing if you go crazy, but what if you drag my brother down with you? Evelyn looked away a little guilty. Huh, you really underestimate your brother. Professor, how powerful do you think I am? Leo asked wearily. Right now, he was probably the weakest person in the car. Helena was about to scold her further when she glanced out the window, and her eyes went wide. Hey, vampire, watch the road. Evelyn jerked the steering wheel hard. Leo saw a dark figure stumble out of the thick fog. It had been staggering across the road, but when it saw their car, its blood-red eyes locked onto them, and it let out a horrifying shriek. It was one of the crazed anomalies. Professor, don't stop, Leo yelled. I know. Evelyn had initially thought it was an innocent bystander, but as soon as she got a clear look at the thing, she floored the accelerator. With a sickening crunch, the front of the car crumpled and filthy blood splattered across the windshield. Leo immediately checked the rearview mirror. The anomaly had been thrown into the air, tumbling a dozen times before it hit the ground. It struggled to get up, but couldn't, its body broken. Leo let out a breath of relief. It wasn't that he feared the creature, but a fight would have wasted precious time. Nice driving, Professor. He couldn't help but laugh. But of course, Evelyn said with a smug grin. You have no idea how long I've been. She snapped her mouth shut, her expression suddenly awkward. She had almost let her real age slip again. Her reaction made Leo chuckle. With driving skills like that, you must have had your license for at least 50 years, right? Don't be ridiculous, she shot back, glaring at him. They didn't even have licenses like this 50 years ago. Leo couldn't hold back his laughter. Now he had a concrete reference for her age. She even knew what the DMV was up to half a century ago. Not that he particularly cared how old she was. A powerful vampire could easily live for 1,000 years. But he loved seeing her get flustered. The normally cool and cocky Professor Evelyn, looking completely cornered, was just too cute. Evelyn shot a resentful glance at Leo's grinning, roguish face and finally fell silent. After several hours of driving, Leo was finally back at Bedlam Asylum. "You're home," Evelyn said, pulling the car up to the front gate. Leo didn't let them get out right away. He pulled out several scars he'd prepared and handed them over. Helena obediently wrapped one around her face, covering her mouth and nose tightly. If the fog really was the problem, it was better than nothing. Only then did Leo open the car door. The situation inside the asylum was even worse than on the streets. It was pandemonium, the air filled with gunfire. The three of them slipped through the gates in the confusion. When they reached his old ward building and entered the hallway, they saw guards with rifles and riot shields try to round up escaped patients. Several bodies already lay on the floor. The guards at Bedlam were no joke. They were armed with state-of-the-art mithril-laced weaponry. The moment they saw an out-of-control patient, they opened fire. Physical therapy, they called it. They're all concentrated in the ward, suppressing the patients, Evelyn observed, her hand instinctively summoning a crimson blade as she scanned the area ahead. Leo placed a hand on her arm, shaking his head. "There's a better way." "What way?" Evelyn asked, curious. Leo peeked out from behind the corner, carefully studying the guards until he had memorized one of their faces. When he pulled back, his muscles began to twitch unnervingly. The sound of his bones cracking and popping filled the air. Evelyn watched in astonishment as Leo's body contorted, and when the spasms stopped, his face had reformed into the plain, unremarkable features of one of the guards. It was the first time Leo had used Helena's formless body ability. It was perfect for infiltration. He said, glancing at a nearby corpse. "Now I just need a uniform." A few moments later, from around the corner, Leo and Helena emerged disguised as asylum guards. Evelyn looked at them. "It's a good plan, but," she said, pointing to herself. "What about me?" Leo grinned. "You're the patient we just captured." Evelyn sighed and nodded. "Fine." And so, Leo and Helena marched down the hall, escorting their mental patient, Evelyn. The corridor was crowded, but no one gave them a second glance. After all, the lunatics were all trying to escape. No one would suspect anyone of trying to get back in. After finding his old room, Leo opened the heavy iron door from the outside. With a groan of metal, the high-ranking member of the Cult of Truth appeared before them. He was a withered, middle-aged man, huddled in the corner of the cell, muttering to himself as if in prayer. The sight of Leo made him look up, his eyes bloodshot and filled with terror. What do you want? Is something wrong?" he stammered, staring at Leo as he slowly approached. Helena quietly shut the heavy door behind them. The dull thud made the man jump. "We have some questions for you," Leo said, softening his tone when he saw how jumpy the man was. "We know you're a member of the cult. You'll probably never get out of here." Leo was a master at making empty promises. He offered a faint smile. "If you answer our questions truthfully, we can arrange for your release. We'll even forget about your past crimes. How about it?" To his surprise, the cultist shook his head frantically, his face twisting as if he were about to cry. "No, don't take me out of here. I'm staying right here. I'm not going anywhere. I love it here. Please, I'm begging you, don't make me leave." Leo stared in astonishment at the man begging to stay. He glanced instinctively at Evelyn. Evelyn shrugged helplessly. "I've seen people try everything to escape an asylum, but I've never seen anyone who actually likes it in here. Don't take me out. Please don't take me out." The cultist continued to shake his head, clearly terrified by the prospect of leaving the hospital. Leo had to change his approach. "Fine, we won't take you out." If the soft approach didn't work, it was time for the hard one. Leo grabbed the man by the collar and threatened in a cold voice, "Tell me about your cult, or I'll kill you." But his words only made the cultist more terrified. "The cult? The Cult of Truth. I can't talk about it. I really can't. They'll kill me. It'll be a horrible death. Please, spare me." As he spoke, he shot a nervous glance out the window, as if he thought he was being watched. His whole body began to tremble violently. "You're not afraid of me killing you, but you're afraid of them?" Leo was losing his patience. He was about to teach the cultist a lesson, but Evelyn beat him to it. A sharp, crimson light flashed. 3 of the cultist's fingers were sliced clean off. Blood spurted from the wounds, and the man clutched his hand, howling in agony. "Yeah." A cold smirk played on Evelyn's lips. "I don't care what you're afraid of, but our time is precious. We don't have all day to listen to you whine." She narrowed her eyes, looking down as she savored the man's tormented expression. "So, answer the gentleman's questions. Now, or else." As she spoke, the crimson blade in her hand morphed into a dagger, which she promptly slammed into the cultist's thigh. The man nearly passed out from the pain. Evelyn's face was suddenly suffused with a chilling viciousness. "Or else, I will kill you in the most brutal way imaginable. Have you ever wondered how anatomical specimens are made?" The cultist looked up at Evelyn in sheer terror. Her gaze was examining his body with unnerving seriousness, as if she were genuinely planning how she would disembowel him and clean out his organs. Leo played along perfectly. "You should believe her. My professor has several human specimens at her house." A shiver ran down the cultist's spine. Then, as if resigned to his fate, his body went limp. "Fine. You can ask." Leo glanced at Professor Evelyn, about to give her a thumbs up, but he noticed something was off about her. He could feel a powerful, suppressed bloodlust radiating from her. Her expression was one of exhilaration and excitement. He'd seen a hint of this during the fight at the mansion, as if she hadn't gotten her fill of killing, as if she'd been possessed by the spirit of slaughter. "Professor," Leo's voice was tinged with concern. "Well, ask him. Weren't you in a hurry?" she snapped, glaring at him impatiently. Leo frowned. Her state was abnormal, but getting information was the priority. He turned his attention back to the cultist. He explained the police crackdown and the mass insanity among the anomalies, then asked what methods the cult of truth had used to achieve it. The cultist's mouth fell open, seemingly surprised by the news. Then, a bitter smile crossed his face. "I told them that man couldn't be trusted, but they wouldn't listen. Now it's all over. Everything is ruined." This piqued Leo's curiosity. It was clear the man knew a lot. As the cultist accepted a roll of bandages, he began to tell Leo what had happened to the cult of truth. After the airship bombing, the cult situation had become desperate. The police were hunting them relentlessly. Their followers were dwindling, and the remaining members were hiding from capture in the chaotic, cramped alleys of downtown. But 2 weeks ago, while Leo was still locked in a battle of wits with Ophelia at her southern estate, a mysterious man had approached them. He wanted to buy a specific potion from them. In return, he offered not only a large sum of money, but also help in evading the authorities. "Evading the authorities?" Leo asked, surprised. "You were at the top of the official most wanted list, and the police raids were always covert. How could he help you escape?" "He provided intelligence," the cultist said, his hands trembling as he wrapped his wound. "He always had inside information. He knew where the police would be and showed us the escape routes." Leo's brow furrowed. Providing that kind of information meant the man was likely an insider. There was a mole in the government. "What did he look like?" Leo asked. The cultist shook his head. "He wore a hood and a mask. I couldn't see his face. All I know is that he was a man." "All right." Leo looked at him, remembering what he'd said about a potion. That had to be the key to what was driving the anomalies mad. He pressed on. "What kind of potion did he want to buy?" The cultist replied, "It's the one we use during our gatherings to give to the followers. It's a kind of hallucinogen, the kind that gets you addicted." A hallucinogen? Leo immediately recalled something Evelyn had told him. She said the Cult of Truth was a dark wizard organization that got its start trafficking and manufacturing drugs. This addictive hallucinogen was almost certainly some kind of narcotic. Helena also asked, "What does the hallucinogen do? What are its effects? It can't just be addictive, right?" The cultist nodded grimly. "According to our doctrine, after followers join us and surrender their wealth, the God of Truth will forgive their sins, guide them beyond this filthy mortal world to touch the world's true essence, and thus enter the beautiful and holy kingdom of heaven." "Of course, it's all nonsense," he continued. "The hallucinogen our leader developed amplifies human senses. Happiness becomes more intense, pain becomes more agonizing. During our specially crafted ceremonies, when they witness some fake miracles, they truly start to believe. They become more and more fanatical and devout. Happiness becomes more intense, pain becomes more agonizing." Helena looked at Leo. Leo nodded, his expression complex. Based on that principle, when people feel the chaos in the city, their negative emotions will also be amplified, and they'll gradually become more panicked and disorderly. And for anomalies, the substance was even more insidious. Anomalies were already just one step away from madness. As their power grew, so did their insight, allowing them to hear voices and see terrifying things others couldn't. The anomalies who had participated in the crackdown on the cult were the ones who suffered the most severe backlash, turning them into uncontrollable madmen. But, the cultist grew more and more frightened. "I've used that stuff myself. How could it be so potent? At this rate, the whole city is going to go mad with us." Leo instinctively looked out the window at the thick fog. He didn't answer, instead asking, How much of the potion did the mystery man buy? He didn't buy much. The cultist said, confused. Suddenly, a look of horrifying realization dawned on his face. That's it, he shouted. That bastard reverse-engineered the formula and mass-produced it. Leo listened as he continued. The mysterious man had asked for the hallucinogens formula, but their leader had refused, as it was their most valuable bargaining chip. The man hadn't pressed the issue and hadn't bought a large quantity. But one day, everything changed. As a high-ranking member of the cult, the man was often by the leader's side. But he gradually began to notice that his leader's behavior was off, as if he'd become a different person entirely. His leader suddenly declared he would fight the government to the bitter end. In a rousing and bewitching speech, he announced the final judgment, a plan to summon their lord to the mortal plane, to sweep away all filth and establish a beautiful new world. As a senior member, the man obviously didn't buy any of it. He thought the leader had gone completely insane. The God of truth they worshipped didn't exist, and even if he did, how could a bunch of ants like them possibly summon him? He was instantly convinced this leader was an imposter, that he must have been killed and replaced by the mysterious man. The atmosphere within the cult grew more and more terrifying. The fanatics were being transformed by some horrific means into monsters devoid of reason and pain, who only followed the leader's commands. The remaining followers spent their days in a feverish frenzy, preparing for war, vowing to slaughter all non-believers. The thought of someone wanting to purchase large quantities of the hallucinogen for some terrible purpose filled him with dread. He grew more and more terrified until he finally found a chance to slip away. His escape was a life-or-death chase. He'd nearly been killed several times, the shrieking howls of the monsters haunting him day and night. The extreme terror nearly drove him mad, but fortunately, he was apprehended by agents from the Bureau of Special Investigations. Because of his erratic behavior, he was sent to this ward for observation and treatment. He had only just started to recover when a citywide chaos erupted before he could even be transferred to the NHBD for interrogation. Leo looked at him. No wonder he'd been so adamant about not being released. For this cultist, being locked up in an asylum was infinitely better than being recaptured by the cult. He looked out at the fog again, a new theory forming in his mind. Perhaps the fog itself was a natural phenomenon, unrelated to the mastermind's interference. The mastermind didn't have the power to control the weather, but they had used the fog as a vehicle, dumping massive quantities of the hallucinogen into the water supply, especially in downtown, where the sewers, drainage pipes, and various factory facilities were complex and poorly regulated. For someone to accomplish that over the past 2 weeks wasn't so hard to imagine. After thinking it through, Leo turned to Evelyn and Helena. Time was running out. He had to stop the mastermind's summoning ritual before the malevolent deity descended. But to his surprise, Evelyn was standing perfectly still, showing no intention of leaving. "Professor, you..." Leo looked at her, stunned. "What's wrong?" He had been so focused on interrogating the cultist that he'd completely missed the change in Evelyn. Her eyes were rapidly losing their light, the deep green turning to a dull, lifeless gray. "Brother, look out!" Helena had also noticed something was wrong with Evelyn and screamed a warning. But it was too late. A crimson shadow blurred, and Evelyn, her fangs now fully extended, lunged straight at Leo. EVOI and corruption level. 62 threat level. 4-star, high risk. They were too close, and Evelyn's specialty was speed. Before he could react, her teeth sank deep into his neck. Leo felt his blood being rapidly siphoned into her mouth. A bloody mist swirled around them as his life force slowly drained away. Being bitten was not a pleasant experience, even by Professor Evelyn. Leo tried to push her off, but his legs gave out. He crashed to the floor, pulling her down with him in a move that looked more like a wrestling takedown. Leo should have hit the ground face first, but Evelyn's body cushioned the fall. There was a dull thud as the back of her head hit the floor. The impact made her release her grip. Leo looked at her face, inches from his own. Her gray, vacant eyes hadn't changed. Covered in his blood, Evelyn lunged to bite him again. But just as she moved, a circle of black thorns materialized around her, binding her body tightly. Punishing Evelyn let out a pain moan. Corruption level. 50 corruption level. 40 Leo kept the punish command active until her corruption level dropped below 20. Seeing her breathing steady, he finally let out a sigh of relief. "Professor, snap out of it." Leo gently patted her cheek. So, he thought, the hallucinogen had been working on her ever since she opened the window and took that breath of fog. He hadn't realized its effects were so potent. According to the cultist, the source was downtown. By the time it reached the East End, It should have been heavily diluted, yet Evelyn still suffered a backlash. It hurts. It hurts so much. Evelyn trembled, her gaze flickering between clarity and chaos. Her hands unconsciously tightened their grip on Leo, her legs wrapping around him anxiously, as if only holding on to him could ease her pain. Leo glanced at a silent Helena and offered Evelyn a wry smile, trying to calm her. "It's okay. Professor, it's okay." He gently patted her back. Finally, after 30 seconds, the normal light returned to her eyes. For other anomalies, corruption and backlash were nearly irreversible. But for those contained by Leo, it only took a simple command. Evelyn struggled to lift her head, her memory of the last few moments hazy. But when she saw the 2 bloody holes in Leo's neck, she gasped. She touched the wounds, her voice filled with guilt. "I'm so sorry, Leo. I don't know what happened to me just now. I suddenly wanted to attack you." It was the first time she had called him by his first name since he'd contained her. Leo just shook his head and smiled. "It's nothing, just a scratch." Seeing that Evelyn was back to normal, he tried to stand up, but she clung to him in a panic. "I think I was dreaming. I dreamt that I'd gone mad, just like the old fossils in my family. Turned into one of those ugly, sullen, twisted old freaks who kill for sport." She looked up, her green eyes filled with worry. "I'm not going to end up like that, am I? You won't let me become one of those hideous things, will you?" A gentle smile touched Leo's lips. "Of course not. My professor is young and beautiful. How could she ever become an ugly monster like that? Really?" Leo nodded, his gaze serious. "Don't worry, Professor. It's my responsibility." Now that he had contained her, Leo would never let that happen. He was confident of that. Evelyn felt as if a heavy weight had finally been lifted from her heart. She let out a long, shuddering breath. "Good, that's good." Unconsciously, her thoughts drifted back to her family. That bloodline that appeared so glamorous on the surface, but was rotten, depraved, and twisted to the core. From the moment she understood, not a day went by that she didn't want to escape that ancient house. It wasn't until the great upheaval that the one and only opportunity arose. She had finally broken away, come to the human society she had longed for, and become an ordinary university teaching assistant. The reason she hated her family so much wasn't just the stifling atmosphere, the archaic traditions, or even a certain betrayal. The most important reason was that she didn't want to become a monster, and the elders of her family were all monsters. Even the Coven's council was mostly made up of monsters. A long life meant long torment. It was a curse. But thankfully, her green eyes slowly shifted to meet the gaze so close to her own, a gaze filled with concern. Evelyn couldn't help but smile. It might be a loss of freedom, but in another sense, it was also a new life, wasn't it? After leaving the asylum, Leo was about to head straight for downtown when he ran into a fully armed contingent of the Order of the Holy Edict marching past the hospital. Judging by their direction, they were heading to the same destination. "Brother, they look so strange," Helena said, pointing at the knights. She'd seen members of the Order before, but this group's attire was bizarre. Leo had noticed it too. Each knight wore a heavy, hooded cloak, and their faces were covered by strange masks with long, bird-like beaks. The masks were unsettling, with only 2 glass lenses for eyes, and they looked completely airtight. As these beak-faced figures emerged from the dense fog, they looked like a procession of hideous demons. Even the escaped lunatics were terrified by the sight, letting out cries of fear. The masks looked familiar to Leo. They resembled the ones worn by plague doctors during the Middle Ages. Evelyn had mostly recovered by now. She watched the column of knights march by and remarked, "They even dug out the old gear they used to fight the Black Death over 100 years ago. Do those masks work?" That was Helena's main concern. "Should we try to get some for ourselves?" Evelyn shook her head. "Honestly, I don't know." But she looked thoughtfully at Leo. Seeing the Order so heavily prepared, do you think they already know someone is deliberately poisoning the city? As the 3 of them stood by the gate discussing it, 2 figures from the column broke off and walked toward them. Leo heard a familiar voice. "What are you doing here?" Though the speaker wore the same beak mask, obscuring his face, Leo recognized the voice of the 3rd prince. The 3 of them fell silent, watching the pair with wary vigilance. The 3rd prince looked at Leo, then glanced at Bedlam Asylum behind him. A look of realization dawned on his face. "Weren't you locked up in there? What? Did you escape during the chaos?" He let out a cold laugh and waved his hand. "Men, seize these escaped lunatics." A squad of knights immediately broke from the ranks and ran toward them. Evelyn looked at him, exasperated. "Don't you have anything better to do?" instead of rushing to downtown to handle the emergency. You had time to pick a fight with us? Leo saw the knight preparing to move in and felt a similar sense of exasperation. He knew, however, that this wasn't just a random act of aggression. It was aimed at Ophelia. After what happened at the estate, the prince had surely marked him as one of Ophelia's people, and a high-ranking one at that. Seeing the knights draw their weapons, Evelyn's palm began to glow with crimson energy, and Helena's body tensed, her tentacles ready to strike. But just as a fight was about to break out, a black carriage came speeding toward them, skidding to a halt between the two groups. As it stopped, it fishtailed, almost deliberately, splattering mud and dirt all over the third prince and his men. The prince turned angrily to see who had just emerged from the carriage. Leo. It was Ophelia. The moment she saw Leo, she rushed over to him. "What are you doing here?" Leo asked, surprised to see her looking so disheveled. "I should be asking you that." She gave his chest a light, reproachful tap. "I told you to stay at the mansion where it was safe, but you wouldn't listen. Do you have any idea how dangerous it is out here?" Leo smiled and nodded, pointing to the scarf around his face. "I have some idea." Ophelia shot him an annoyed look. "What good is that thing going to do?" She called out for Carolyn, who emerged from the carriage carrying several of the same plague doctor masks the third prince's men were wearing. Leo glanced at the knights, then lowered his voice. "You and the Order are both prepared for this. Does that mean the higher-ups already know what's happening in downtown?" Ophelia shook her head. "The fools at City Hall are always a step behind. By the time they react, the whole city will be dead. I only knew the fog was a problem thanks to Carolyn. You know she's an expert in pharmacology." Leo glanced at Carolyn and nodded. Her skill with potions was indeed impressive. He'd experienced her hypnotics firsthand. After distributing the masks to Helena and Evelyn, Leo looked at Ophelia gratefully. "In that case, you'll come with me to downtown," she said. Her timing was perfect. He needed all the help he could get. "I came here specifically because I knew that's where you'd be going," Ophelia replied with a smile. "I didn't expect to run into you this soon. It must be fate." As they spoke, the third prince, who had been staring daggers at Ophelia, could no longer contain his astonishment. Seeing their intimate behavior, it was clear this man wasn't just her subordinate. "I say, little sister," the third prince said, his tone a mix of mockery and sarcasm. "Aren't you going to reintroduce us to your Mr. Sterling here?" But Ophelia didn't even glance in his direction, treating him as if he were invisible. For a man of the third prince's temperament, nothing was more infuriating than being completely ignored. Beneath his mask, a cold expression formed on his face. "Let's go," Ophelia said, turning toward her carriage. Leo glanced at the third prince, standing stiffly to the side, then nodded to Ophelia. "Right, we can't afford to waste any more time." They all climbed into the black carriage, which sped away, leaving the third prince standing alone, his expression shifting from anger to calculation. "Your Highness," his aide said, head bowed. "We're heading out as well," the prince snapped. "I will not let her steal the credit for this." "Yes, Your Highness." The carriage raced toward downtown, which was actually quite close to the city center, though it sat on lower ground. Inside, Leo fiddled with one of the plague doctor masks. Honestly, he had his doubts about its effectiveness. It was certainly airtight with intake and exhaust valves, but the filtering material inside the beak was a mix of fragrant herbs, lavender, and spices. It seemed less like a gas mask and more like an air freshener. It made sense, he supposed. This world hadn't invented chemical warfare, so the conditions for creating a proper gas mask didn't exist. This primitive version was all they had, and it was debatable how much good it had done against the original Black Death. "You don't think it will work?" Ophelia asked, watching him. Leo nodded, but put the mask on anyway. He wanted to modify it, turn it into a real gas mask, but there was no time. The carriage had already arrived in downtown New Haven. It navigated the narrow, cluttered streets, where ramshackle, illegal structures blocked out what little light there was. Even in the daytime, it felt like night, and the thick fog made visibility almost zero. Leo looked out the window. This place, already a cesspool of crime and filth, was even more chaotic than he had imagined. The air reeked of blood. Bodies, gunfire, and crime were everywhere, and fires raged uncontrolled. While the upper city still had some semblance of order, downtown had devolved into pure anarchy. As the carriage approached the cultist meeting place, their intel had pointed to a mission notification popped up. The Wigner Terror Incident, Finale, Objective, proceed to downtown, disrupt the summoning ritual for the malevolent deity, and end the escalating chaos in the city. Reward, +20 to any attribute, +1 low-tier talent. +1 mid-tier item, +1 fixed high-tier item. Leo's eyes widened. The rewards for this mission were incredibly generous. Of course, generous rewards meant the mission was incredibly difficult. Stopping the descent of a malevolent deity, possibly even facing it directly. Could their small group really pull it off? Leo looked at the faces of his companions, all watching him silently, and the weight on his shoulders grew heavier. The carriage finally arrived at the scene. It was a rare open space in downtown, the ruins of a demolished building, likely cleared for a future factory. Leo and Ophelia were the first to jump out. The sight before them was a vision from hell. The carriage driver was so horrified he nearly broke down completely. A thunderous, booming drumbeat pounded out a malevolent, oppressive rhythm. Naked cultists danced frenetically around a raging bonfire, their bodies twisting in ecstasy as they laughed, leaped, and howled like beasts in a never-ending, bacchanalian revelry. Hanging all around them were the mutilated, blood-soaked remains of human bodies, officers from the New Haven Police Department, the crazed BSI agents from before, and, given the sheer number, likely many innocent downtown residents, forming a mountain of gore. At the center of the ritual grounds, concentric circles of bizarre symbols were painted in fresh blood. A statue of the cult of Truth's deity stood in the middle. The statue, normally a figure of sacred mercy, was cast in flickering, shadowy firelight, giving it an unervingly sinister air in this context. Even through the plague, Dr. Masks, the putrid stench of blood and filth seeped in. The driver was so sickened by the smell that he vomited into his mask, which only made him want to vomit more. Ophelia's personal guards also looked nervous and unsettled. Leo, however, remained relatively calm. He had imagined countless horrific scenarios on the way here, and this was still within the realm of his comprehension. He was focused on comforting Helena, whose corruption level had started to skyrocket the moment she saw the scene. Professor Evelyn was a seasoned veteran. She simply scanned the ritual site with a frown before her eyes darted to the fire-lit periphery, sensing danger. A crimson scythe materialized in her hand. By now, the Order of the Holy Edict had arrived behind them. They assembled and immediately charged into the ritual site. Any cultist who tried to resist was blown to pieces by their double-barreled shotguns. The knights weren't here to make arrests. They were here to contain the situation and end the chaos. In their eyes, the crazed cultists were the source of the problem. The deafening roar of gunfire spread through the area, making everyone's ears ring. Facing the heavily armed and powerful knights, the scene quickly turned into a one-sided slaughter. Ophelia frowned and looked at Leo, her eyes, visible through her mask, showing confusion. Leo knew what she was thinking. If it were this easy, what had happened to the bodies of all those dead anomalies? There had to be something far more dangerous here. Your Highness! Jason, the leader of her shadow guard, suddenly ran over, his eyes fixed on the fog and fire-shrouded sky above. Something's up there. As soon as he spoke, a piercing, ear-splitting shriek enveloped the entire area. Everyone looked up nervously and saw a massive dark shadow emerge from the fog. It was a giant, flying creature, serpentine and monstrous. Its head was grotesquely twisted, covered in a dense mass of tentacle-like appendages. Its wings looked like black rubber, but it didn't seem to fly with them, instead floating effortlessly in mid-air, looking down on them all. "Is that the god?" Carolyn asked, instantly on alert. All the guards formed a protective circle around Ophelia. As the bizarre, colossal creature dived, the knights unleashed the full force of their firepower upon it. But the bullets had no effect and only seemed to enrage it. The monster beat its wings, and its massive black tail swept across the ground, sending the knights flying like bowling pins. Its piercing cry also unleashed a psychic assault that threatened to drive everyone mad. Eviolene corruption level 55, Helena corruption level 63. Leo gritted his teeth and looked at them. Helena's tentacles were flailing uncontrollably, her face contorted in a snarl, her body shaking violently. Evelyn's eyes had once again faded to a lifeless gray. The masks offered little protection against this. They had already inhaled a fair amount of the fog, and with this psychic attack on top of it, even Leo, with his high sanity, nearly lost consciousness. He immediately clamped his hands over his ears, trying to block out all sensory input, then turned to Helena and Evelyn and issued a control command. The backlash affecting them finally subsided. Leo looked back at the sky. The oppressive presence of the monster was indescribable. A single basic attack combined with a psychic assault had neutralized everyone on the field. Leo. Ophelia gripped his wrist tightly, her eyes already turning a deep, dark red. Leo immediately pulled out the suppression serum he always carried and administered it to her, then handed more to her guards. "Find cover," he commanded through clenched teeth. Fighting a flying monster in an open field was suicide. Once they had recovered, the guards quickly escorted Ophelia toward the surrounding buildings. Leo kept his eyes on the monster's movements as he pulled Evelyn and Helena along behind them. "A thing like that, how are we supposed to fight it?" Evelyn muttered, watching the chaos unfold from their hiding spot. The knights were drawing swords, firing guns, and casting spells, but none of their attacks did more than scratch the monster's massive hide. The Order had even brought something resembling an armored vehicle, but after another sweep of the monster's tail, the heavily armed and armored truck exploded in midair. "We were too late," Leo said grimly. They had wasted too much time at the asylum. The summoning ritual must have already been completed, but at least the massive, biological-looking monster didn't seem completely invincible. If it was a living creature, it had a weakness. The knights just didn't have enough firepower, and there weren't enough reinforcements. Leo refused to believe it could withstand 2 volleys from the entire Navy's cannons. Just as he was thinking this, he heard the sound of a little girl giggling nearby. Leo turned in shock. A small, dark-skinned girl, no older than 10, was sitting on the roof of a wrecked car. She was smiling as she watched the chaos, her bare feet dangling and swinging back and forth, as if she were having the time of her life. The appearance of this little girl in such a bloody and chaotic ritual site, looking so happy and carefree, was utterly bizarre. A sense of dread and alarm washed over Leo. "Who are you?" he demanded in a cold voice. The little girl didn't answer. She just gazed at the hellish, chaotic world before her, a look of pure delight and satisfaction on her face. Interesting. Now, this is interesting. This trip wasn't a waste after all. So much fun. Chaos and fear continued to spread through downtown. As Leo stared intently at the bizarre little girl, Helena tugged on his sleeve. "Brother, what are you looking at?" she asked, confused. Leo turned back in surprise. "You can't see her?" "See what?" Helena was even more bewildered. She peered in the direction her brother had been looking. Evelyn, hearing their exchange, quickly scanned the area, but then she too looked at Leo with a puzzled expression. "I don't see anything. What's over there?" She grew nervous. "You're not starting to hallucinate, are you?" Anomalies were prone to audio and visual hallucinations as a symptom of backlash. Evelyn feared this was happening now. If even Leo went mad, it was all over. No one would be left to suppress the changes in her own body. A jolt went through Leo. He whipped his head back to where he'd seen her. The wrecked car was still there, outside the alley, but its roof was empty. There was no giggling little girl. Leo rubbed his eyes in disbelief. Was it really a hallucination? He dismissed the thought almost immediately. The feeling had been too real. Besides, his status panel confirmed it. He wasn't insane, his mind was still sound. A cascade of questions flooded his mind. Who was she? Why was she here? What did she want? Brother. Helena's cry snapped him out of his thoughts. She pointed frantically ahead. In the short time he'd been distracted, the massive monster rampaging in the ruined square had completely annihilated the full contingent of the Order of the Holy Edict. Even the fanatical cultists who had summoned it were all dead. The entire ruin was now carpeted with mangled corpses, a true sea of blood and bodies. There was no more time to think. Ophelia looked at Leo. "We need to leave. Now." Her guards closed in around her. Carolyn said urgently, "The horses are spooked. I'll go find a vehicle for you, Your Highness." Leo's face was grim. He looked at Ophelia. In this situation, escape was probably impossible. As expected, the moment they made a move, a chilling atmosphere descended upon them. They all felt the gaze of something terrifying and looked up. The giant monster, which had been far away just moments ago, was now hovering directly above them, looking down at the ants on the ground. A shudder ran through all of them. The instant they were caught in its gaze, their blood seemed to freeze in their veins. Then, from what must have been the monster's throat, a grotesque, indescribable sound began to bubble and squirm. "You're under intense psychic assault. Performing sanity check." The psychic attack was so powerful that it obliterated any thought of escape. They could only stand frozen in place, their eyes slowly losing focus. Fortunately, Leo had anticipated this. The moment he realized the monster had locked onto them, he threw the shoulder bag he always carried into the air. As the psychic shockwave hit, the bag fell to the ground, and the glass vials inside shattered, releasing a pungent chemical odor. Leo and those around him snapped back to their senses. He let out a desperate roar. "Run!" His shout was followed by the sound of the monster's massive black tail slamming down. The ground shook violently. Dust and debris filled the air. The alley where they had been standing was instantly obliterated, leaving nothing but a massive crater. Even with his quick reaction, Leo was still caught in the blast, half his body buried under the rubble. The pain was so intense he almost lost consciousness. He could only blink, his eyes open dazedly. A ringing in his ears deafened him, but he could see something frantically digging at the bricks and rubble on top of him. He saw Helena's face, streaked with tears of terror, her lower body a writhing mass of tentacles. He saw Professor Evelyn, wielding her blood-red scythe, her body covered in blood as she and the shadow guards bravely charged the behemoth in the sky. The rubble shifted. A pair of panicked, crimson eyes appeared before him. Ophelia gritted her teeth, and all the objects around her began to float into the air as the power of the dreamlands interfered with reality. The monster in the sky let out an enraged roar. It stopped attacking the people on the ground. For a brief moment, it seemed there was a chance to escape, but neither Helena nor Ophelia had any intention of running. When they finally dug Leo out, they helped him up, both letting out a sigh of relief. If I use my full power, the dreamlands might be able to hold it off for a moment, Ophelia said, her eyes locked on Leo. I'll cover you. It can't catch you. Go now. Just as she finished speaking, a crimson shadow fell from the sky. Leo saw Evelyn hit the ground, her arm and ankle twisted at unnatural angles. She let out a pained grunt. The monster, despite its size, was not clumsy. It was terrifyingly agile. One by one, the black shadows of the guards burst in showers of blood and viscera, their remains raining down. Against absolute power, even their suicidal bravery amounted to nothing. Leo looked at Ophelia and shook his head. You think I'd abandon you and run away alone? Leo. Ophelia squeezed his hand, her voice raw with emotion. There's still a chance. There has to be. I won't let you die. I absolutely won't. There are no more chances, Leo said quietly, his gaze shifting from her to the sky. Besides the monster casting its shadow over them, numerous other massive figures had appeared in the sky. They circled high above, parting the fog and bringing with them a scene of absolute despair, like the advent of demons. Leo silently tightened his grip on Helena's and Ophelia's hands. Faced with this hellscape, he found himself smiling. He looked at Ophelia's profile and said with a wry grin, See, I didn't lie to you. Now we really will be together forever. Her crimson eyes snapped to his. Seeing his smile, the despair in her own gaze slowly began to fade. Ophelia returned a soft, gentle smile. Yes, I'll give you that. You kept your word. Mission P5.I have died. Game cannot continue. Forcing reload. Leo's eyes snapped open again. The hellish scene from downtown was gone. He was looking at Helena and Evelyn, sitting on the sofa in the mansion. He let out a silent sigh of relief. Time had rewound to the day before, right after he bid farewell to Ophelia and returned home to contain Helena. The Wigner Terror Incident, finale, save point. Riverfront Road, mansion reloads remaining. April 5th objective. Proceed to downtown, disrupt the summoning ritual for the malevolent deity, and end the escalating chaos in the city. After completing Helena's containment, Leo rushed to the entryway and threw on his clothes as fast as he could. He yanked open the front door and yelled back at them. Stop eating. Let's go. Since he was back a day earlier, there was still time. What? What's going on? Evelyn, seeing the urgency on Leo's face, put down her sausage and hurried after him. Brother, where are we going? Helena didn't question him. Her brother often had these sudden, frantic moments. Leo looked at her. To save the world. Helena nodded. Oh, okay. Evelyn blinked. Huh. Leo didn't have time to explain. He quickly replayed the last loop in his head and gave Evelyn her instructions. I'm going to borrow a car. 2 of them. I need to go find Ophelia immediately. I'll tell you what to say. We'll meet at the downtown checkpoint as fast as possible. With that, he grabbed his revolver and ran to the neighbor's house. After securing the cars, Leo drove with Helena, speeding toward downtown. Along the way, the city was still in chaos, but it was nothing compared to what it would face a day from now. Leo kept his foot on the gas, and they soon reached the border between the East End and downtown. The factories grew more numerous here, and the terrain sloped downward. This was the lower reaches of the Great River, making it ideal for discharging industrial waste. Most of the city's magitech industry was located here. As they drove onto a complex steel bridge, the city's verticality became apparent. Looking down, a dense sprawl of black buildings stretched as far as the eye could see, the lowest streets hidden from view. A foul, unpleasant smell wafted up. Leo pulled the scarves tighter over his and Helena's faces. After getting out of the car, he saw that the bridge crossing was blocked. A crowd of police officers, K9 units, and vehicles were crammed on the east end side. Leo spotted Captain Raymond's and his aide in the crowd and finally breathed a sigh of relief. They hadn't entered downtown yet. He was just in time. Captain. Leo strode over. Leo. Captain Raymond's looked at Leo and Helena in confusion. What are you two doing here? I thought you were just discharged from the hospital today. No time for that. Leo glanced at the checkpoint gate, which was slowly opening. He quickly pulled the captain aside and whispered, "The cult's meeting place is a trap. You can't go in recklessly. You'll all die." What? Raymond stared at him in shock. How do you know that? And besides, he added, puzzled, even if it is a trap, so what? See those guys with us? They're agents from the Bureau of Special Investigations. Powerful anomalies. We're under orders to wipe out the cult of truth. Raymond's pointed to the other side of the road. Leo saw the BSI director, still in his black coat, giving instructions to his agents. No, they'll only make things worse. Leo quickly explained about the hallucinogenic fog and how it would drive the anomalies insane. Captain Raymond's face was a mask of horror. Not even the BSI agents are immune. If they go crazy too, we'll be the ones in danger. Leo nodded grimly. That was exactly right. The captain's gruesome fate in the first loop was thanks in no small part to the crazed anomalies, on top of the cult's modified monsters. Then what should we do? We can't just turn back, can we? Raymond's looked anxiously at his colleagues, who were ready to move out. My supervisor from the Department of Public Safety is here. I don't have the final say. You don't have to turn back, but you need to wait. Leo looked back at the road they'd come from. What you need to do now is stall them for a bit. We absolutely cannot enter downtown yet. Captain Raymond's looked at Leo's dead serious expression and sighed. All right, I'll try. Don't you dare be lying to me. I'll be humiliated in front of my boss. Leo gave him an exasperated look. This is no time for that. Go, Captain. Raymond's trudged off reluctantly toward his colleagues and supervisor. Leo turned his gaze back to the road, waiting quietly in the thick fog. Brother, are you waiting for backup? Helena asked. She knew he had sent the vampire to find that woman. Backup is coming, Leo nodded. But there's something else, too. 20 minutes later, the gate was wide open, but the entire force remained stationary. A buzz of confused chatter rippled through the crowd. Just then, 3 black carriages pierced through the heavy fog and pulled up on the bridge. Leo saw Ophelia walking quickly toward him, her shadow guards following behind, each carrying a heavy chest. A crimson shadow flashed, and Evelyn reappeared at his side. I told her everything you said. Thanks, Professor. Leo gave her a grateful smile and went to meet Ophelia. I've notified my second brother. The city guard is mobilizing. And Ophelia took a box and pulled out a plague doctor mask, looking puzzled. What did you mean about replacing the contents with charcoal and those other things? Leo took the mask, inspected it carefully, and nodded in satisfaction. To prevent us from breathing in the poison gas, of course. He put it on, his voice becoming muffled. And this will work? Evelyn had been instructing Ophelia's people on how to modify the masks. She was curious too. Could simply replacing the herbs and spices with charcoal really protect them from the toxic fog? It's better than what was in there before, Leo said with a small smile. Activated carbon could adsorb toxic substances and act as a filter. It was the principle behind later gas masks. This was one instance where modern scientific knowledge was incredibly useful. The only downside was that he couldn't find professional-grade activated carbon. So he had to make do with a crude version made from wood charcoal. It was how the first gas masks were made during World War I in his world, after all. Leo took the chests of masks over to Captain Raymond's and gave him a quick rundown. Then they distributed the rest to the BSI agents. You want us to wear these? One of the agents asked, examining the strange mask with disapproval. We can barely see with this thing on, and the fog is already this thick. How are we supposed to fight? There's no other way. It's better than going insane later, Leo said, his eyes sweeping over the crowd. Everyone going into downtown to raid the cult of truth must wear one. Many of them looked bewildered. The agent who had spoken before just snorted, clearly unhappy about being ordered around by an outsider. Mr. Sterling, the BSI director in the black coat, looked at Leo with a hesitant expression. He didn't have a condescending attitude, but he was clearly skeptical. Are you saying that just by breathing this fog, an anomaly will suffer a backlash? This fog has been here for days, and we haven't felt any abnormal effects. That's because you're all official government anomalies who have undergone rigorous testing. You're stronger than the average anomaly. And Leo quickly relayed the information he'd gotten from the cultist, especially the principle behind the drug. It stimulates the senses and amplifies human emotions. The director frowned thoughtfully. If that's the case, it would indeed be very dangerous. He was not a rigid or stubborn man. He knew that even his agents, despite careful screening and therapy, were still at risk of falling into madness from overusing their powers. Cases involving cults and malevolent deities were always the most treacherous. Listen to him, Fredericks, Ophelia said from behind Leo. Director Fredericks looked at the fifth princess, who had once overseen the BSI, then back at Leo. He finally nodded. Bureau of Special Investigations, Teams 1, 2, and 3, he called out to his men. All of you put on the masks. After everyone was equipped, the force finally began to move, heading into downtown at top speed. Leo, Ophelia, and their group walked to the front. As they drew closer to the cult's secret meeting place, Leo couldn't help but feel a knot of tension tighten in his stomach. He hoped this time they weren't too late. A/N, adding some reference art. Played Dr. Horror Hunter Ophelia. When the team finally reached the lowest level of downtown, just short of the cult's ritual site, visibility dropped to near zero. The fog was as thick as a wall. Leo couldn't even see Captain Raymond's, who was right there in the procession. Fortunately, one of the BSI agents was a spellcaster. He stepped forward and, after a long and arcane incantation, unleashed a blast of air that parted the fog like the Red Sea, carving a path ahead. The turbulent air currents dispersed some of the surrounding mist, and visibility improved slightly. They could finally see the ruined square in the distance. Leo could just make out the statue of the deity erected in the center of the square, with bonfires burning around it. The cultists were busy setting up the site. It looked like the summoning ritual hadn't begun yet. Captain Raymond ran up, his eyes fixed on the scene ahead. Excellent. The rats are all gathered in one place. We can finally wipe them out in one go. Hold on, Captain, Leo said, placing a hand on the excited man's arm and giving him a cautious warning. They have a large group of fanatics who feel no pain and have no fear of death. Have your officers seal off the area and block all their escape routes. Leave the rest to us. Got it. Captain Raymond, trusting Leo completely, didn't hesitate for a second. He returned to his men, and several police squads fanned out, setting up defensive positions in the streets and blocking every nearby alleyway. By the time they were done, 20 minutes had passed. Leo turned to Ophelia. Any other orders, Commander? Ophelia asked with a smile. Don't tease me. Leo pointed to several high-ground positions around them. The fanatics can't be killed with normal firearms. The only way to stop them is to destroy their ability to move, headshots, torso shots, that kind of thing. I remember the BSI has a few hunters. Their alchemical rifles have serious stopping power. This time, before Ophelia could say anything, Director Fredericks nodded. In that case, we'll split into two teams. He turned to his agents. Gerard, John, and you few, take the water tower and the bridge. I'll have Joe keep the fog in the square clear. You'll be on your own, so be careful. Several agents immediately stepped forward. Leo recognized the brawny man who liked to call himself a monster hunter, Gerard. Carrying a massive gun case, Gerard grinned broadly. Don't worry, leave it to us. After the arrangements were made, Fredericks looked at Leo, who had effectively become the operations field commander, and said with a smile, after this is over, perhaps you should join us at the Bureau of Special Investigations. Leo was surprised by the offer. He thought the director was joking at first, but then he saw he was serious. Leo shook his head. I'm just an ordinary citizen. Why would you want me to join the BSI? I don't have the skills for it. You're being too modest, Mr. Sterling, Frederick said, his smile fading as he looked at him seriously. You're an anomaly yourself. During a recent review, I discovered that you've been secretly involved in quite a few of our past cases. And yet, in all that time, you haven't shown any signs of instability or backlash. That alone proves you more than meet our selection criteria. In fact, your willpower is far stronger than that of my own agents. Fredericks is right about that, Ophelia said, a hint of laughter in her voice. She looked at Leo through the glass lenses of her mask. He always claims to be an ordinary person, but what ordinary person gets involved in such dangerous incidents and deals with grotesque things on a daily basis? Just think of me as crazy, Leo muttered with a shrug. He looked at her. Besides, if I didn't get involved in those things, how would I have ever met you? That's true. Ophelia nodded. Then brother shouldn't get involved in those things anymore. Helena, who had been quiet until now, piped up. She looked at Leo earnestly. If brother didn't get involved in those things, he wouldn't meet all those bad women. Leo was taken aback by her strange logic. Seeing Ophelia's expression darken slightly, Evelyn let out a stifled laugh. She pulled Helena back. "All right, stop causing trouble. Let the adults handle their business." Helena huffed and sulked back into the group. Once all the preparations were complete, the team finally arrived at the ruined square. The sudden appearance of intruders threw the cultists into a panic. But they clearly had a leader, who immediately unleashed the mindless fanatics. They charged straight for Leo's position. This time, however, Leo didn't even need to act. The BSI agents unleashed their overwhelming power and quickly brought the situation under control. Joe, the agent who had cleared a path earlier, whipped up a vortex of wind. The powerful gust not only scattered the attacking crowd, but also blew away all the fog in the square. As visibility cleared, a barrage of heavy fire rained down from the high ground. Many of the fanatics were blown to pieces before they even got close to Leo, their bodies reduced to a bloody pulp. But that wasn't all. One agent's shadow came to life and started killing. Another summoned a demonic claw. A third transformed into a rampaging giant. When the strongest of New Haven's official anomalies were gathered in one place, the Cult of Truth, despite their numbers, stood no chance. Leo had been planning to use team mode to command Helena and Evelyn, but now it was completely unnecessary. He didn't even have a chance to get involved. "It doesn't seem as tough as you said it would be," Evelyn remarked, looking at Leo. He had, after all, described this as a crisis that could destroy the entire city. Leo surveyed the battlefield. By neutralizing the threat that drove the anomalies mad, they had indeed turned the tables. But he couldn't let his guard down. The memory of that hellish scene from the first loop was still fresh in his mind. With the combined forces of the BSI and the police, the entire square was now under control. The crazed fanatics had all been killed, and more than half of the remaining cultists were dead, leaving the ground littered with bodies. The few surviving high-ranking members were all apprehended and put in handcuffs. It seemed that it was all over. Leo and the others walked toward the ritual site at the center of the square. Chapter 129. The chaos in the ruined square had subsided. The Bureau of Special Investigations was experienced in handling cult-related cases. Several agents were already toppling the statue, extinguishing the bonfires, and erasing the concentric circles of bloody symbols, effectively dismantling the summoning ritual. Director Fredericks, that was a close call. The head of the Department of Public Safety, a cheerful-looking middle-aged man, approached with Captain Raymond's and other senior officers in tow, a triumphant smile on his face. This major cult case that has shaken the nation has finally been solved. The department head shook Fredericks' hand like an old friend. Thanks to the excellent collaboration between our two departments, we were able to resolve this smoothly. I think the Imperial Council can finally rest easy, and His Majesty can be at ease. Fredericks' expression was less than enthusiastic. He offered a cool, detached smile. "Just doing our duty. It's what we at the BSI are here for." "Nonsense. I'll be hosting a celebration banquet. Director Fredericks, you simply must attend." While they were talking, Leo's group was carefully examining the ritual site. Evelyn glanced at the two officials and muttered to Leo under her breath, "Captain Raymond's boss is trying to steal all the credit. No wonder Fredericks looks so cold." Leo smiled at her. Professor Evelyn certainly had a knack for reading these situations. He glanced over at the captain. The head of the Department of Public Safety had been a complete bystander during the operation, yet he was talking as if the credit was split 50-50. No wonder Fredericks looked annoyed. Just then, Helena appeared out of nowhere. But it was Brother's idea to modify the masks, and we only solved this so easily thanks to his intelligence. Without him, they all would have gone insane. If you ask me, Brother deserves most of the credit. Listening to their complaints, Ophelia shook her head with a faint smile. "That's just the way it is. The soldiers do the work, but the leaders get the glory. Look over there. Another group is coming to take their share." They all looked and saw a third faction emerging from the fog. The fully armed order of the Holy Edict had arrived. "Secure the perimeter. Don't let a single one of these cultists come escape," the third prince commanded, acting as if he were in charge. A new wave of chaos erupted in the now quiet square. The BSI and the Order had never gotten along, and the agents immediately moved to block the knights from entering further. Seeing the third prince, both Fredericks and the department head's expression soured. Helena took it all in, muttering with disgust, "The world of adults, always fighting for power and profit. It's so dirty." "It is dirty," Ophelia said quietly. Though she was a part of it, she had never liked this aspect of her life. Leo, however, had no time to dwell on such things. He was waiting for a change in his mission panel. The cultists had been wiped out. The summoning ritual had been destroyed. Everything should have been over. The mission should have been marked as complete by now. But the completion notification never came. A growing sense of unease settled in his stomach. Leo scanned the surrounding fog, as if waiting for something. Leo, Ophelia noticed his strange behavior and followed his gaze. What's over there? Leo's voice was grim. It's not over yet. What? They all looked at him. And just then, everything changed. The temperature in the square plummeted, becoming bone-chillingly cold. The fog suddenly grew thicker, so dense that they couldn't see their hands in front of their faces. Someone is casting a spell. One of the P5.I's spellcasters shouted, sensing the shift. Agents, police, and knights all raised their weapons, pointing them into the oppressive mist, but they could see nothing. Then, an even more shocking development occurred. From beyond the fog, from the city of downtown itself, Leo heard a series of massive explosions. The sounds came from all directions, near and far, followed by the panicked screams and cries of downtown's residents. Gerard, carrying his huge alchemical rifle, rushed out of the fog. He held up his hands and yelled, "Don't shoot. It's me. What's happening?" Fredericks demanded. Explosions. Explosions everywhere. Gerard shouted, "I saw it clearly from up there." Someone planted countless explosives all over downtown and detonated them all at once. His words threw the crowd into an uproar. Someone else yelled, "Ethereum crystals. This is the power of runaway Ethereum crystals." Hearing that, Leo's face fell. He turned to his group. "Come with me. Now." He immediately broke into a sprint, heading out of the fog. "Where are we going?" Evelyn called out, surprised, as she ran after him. Leo didn't answer, instead leading them out of the square and toward the same alley where they had hidden from the monster in the previous loop. The same place he had seen the mysterious little girl. As they left, a terrifying, earth-shaking roar echoed from high above the square. Everyone looked up nervously. Though they couldn't see anything, they could feel something massive approaching. Until that demonic black shadow once again descended upon the world. Leo glanced back as he ran and was stunned by what he saw. Even though they had stopped the ritual, the behemoths had still appeared. The entire downtown district was now in chaos. The explosions had terrified the residents, who poured out of their homes, even if their own buildings hadn't been hit. The streets were choked with a panicked, surging mob. The police barricades were overrun. Leo and his group were swept up in the crowd, unable to reach their destination. Looking at the terrified, chaotic masses, Leo had a sudden, horrifying realization. The ritual in the square wasn't the real summoning, or rather, the chaos in the city is the real summoning ritual. The others stopped and stared at him in shock. Leo's mind seemed to ascend, rising above the fog, above downtown, above all of New Haven, as he looked down upon the chaotic city of steam. The chaos is the ritual. The ritual is the chaos. The entire city of New Haven is the altar, and everyone here is a sacrifice to the malevolent god. Then what do we do? Ophelia demanded, her eyes fixed on him. My second brother's city guard should be on their way. If they can restore order and eliminate all the unstable elements, maybe it will end this. That won't work. There will always be loopholes. Leo said with a bitter smile, looking at the frightened civilians, at a weeping mother clutching her dead child. People's fear of Magitech and Ethereum crystals is too deep-seated to be reversed so quickly. The whole city is like a fuse next to a powder keg. It just takes one spark. Then what's the answer? Is it hopeless? Evelyn grumbled, pushing through the crowd. Are we supposed to evacuate the whole city? It's too late for that. It is too late. Leo finally broke free of the crowd. He looked into the thick fog. The alley should be just across the street. Just then, from within the fog ahead, came the sound of wild, ecstatic laughter. Ha ha ha! The entire city is a gift for you. Do you like this masterpiece? Rejoice. Be glad. The crawling chaos, the embodiment of fear and chaos. The great Nyarlathotep. Stay for me. Gaze upon your humble servant. The mad laughter echoed through the chaotic street. Though a layer of fog separated them, Leo could almost see the mastermind, savoring his work with unbridled glee, eagerly awaiting the descent of his god. And then, mission failed. Game cannot continue. Forcing reload. Chapter 130. His eyes shot open. Leo was back in a mansion one day in the past. Chapter 2. The Wigner Terror Incident Finale. Save point, Riverfront Road, Mansion. Reloads remaining, 3/5. Time was short. Only 3 chances left. Leo rapidly reviewed all the clues from the first 2 attempts. As he replayed the memory of the explosions in downtown and the mastermind's crazed laughter in the fog, a plan began to form in his mind. He turned to Helena and Evelyn. "Let's go." He changed quickly, grabbed his revolver, and once again borrowed a car from the neighbor. Flooring the accelerator, he met Ophelia at the downtown checkpoint. The first part of the plan was the same as last time. Force everyone in the operation to wear the modified Play Doctor masks, have the police set up a perimeter, position Gerard and the other hunters on high ground, and then, with the BSI agents, wipe out the cultists in the square. This blatant overstepping of authority earned him some disgruntled looks from the BSI agents, but Leo didn't care. There was no time to worry about their feelings. The cultists in the square were quickly cleared out, the senior members were captured, and he dismantled the fake summoning ritual. Once everything seemed to be settled, the head of the Department of Public Safety began his friendly chat with Fredericks again, and the third prince, ever the opportunist, arrived to claim his share of the glory. Everything seemed to be playing out exactly as before. The only difference was that this time, Leo called Ophelia over and asked her in a low, serious voice, "What's the maximum range of your Dreamland's ability? I mean the kind that can interfere with reality, not just in a dream." Ophelia, who had noticed his grim expression the entire way here, answered honestly. "The time at the estate was my first attempt at using my dreams to affect reality. The range was about the size of this square." She gestured vaguely. "I could probably go bigger, but it would become increasingly unstable." After hearing her answer, Leo nodded, finally looking relieved. "Why do you ask?" Ophelia said, now curious herself. Leo glanced at her, then leaned in and whispered his plan in her ear. Ophelia's eyes widened in surprise. Then, under the cover of the chaotic square, her figure faded into the fog and disappeared. Leo remained where he was, silently observing everyone in the square, waiting. From the last loop, he now knew the condition for the summoning ritual was chaos. If New Haven descended into enough chaos, the god would appear. The mastermind had a 2-pronged plan to ensure it happened. When he realized the ritual in the square had been thwarted and the cult wiped out, he had decisively cast a spell to trap everyone present while he detonated the Ethereum crystal bombs hidden throughout downtown. It was a meticulous plan, but he could never have anticipated Leo's ability to reload. The mastermind's spell casting in the last loop had revealed his location. Leo carefully scanned every face in the square. The police officers, the BSI agents, the Knights of the Holy Edict. According to the cultist from the asylum, the mastermind was an insider. He knew the details of every official raid, which was how the Cult of Truth had repeatedly escaped. He was also able to plant so many dangerous explosives throughout downtown during a citywide lockdown. Only someone from one of these 3 organizations could have done it. So, the mastermind was here, and very, very close. To stop this disaster, he had to be found. Leo waited patiently. About 10 minutes later, as expected, things began to happen. The temperature dropped, and the fog in the square thickened, reducing visibility to nothing. Then, from high above, came that same terrifying, earth-shaking roar. "What is that thing?" Everyone cried out, looking up in shock. They could faintly make out a colossal black shadow in the sky, large enough to blot out the sun. But because of the fog, the terrifying figure quickly vanished. Not getting a clear look at the thing only amplified their fear of the unknown. A wave of panic swept through the square. "It's the evil god. The god has descended. How can this be? Wasn't the summoning ritual destroyed? We're doomed." While everyone else panicked, Director Fredericks shot a suspicious glance at Leo. He noticed that the 5th princess was no longer by his side. Having worked with Ophelia before, he recognized this as her ability, but he had no idea what the 2 of them were planning. After the appearance of the terrifying monster, like a chain reaction, explosions once again rocked downtown from beyond the fog. "Brother?" Leo took a nervous Helena's hand, giving her a reassuring squeeze. He looked around. From the monster's appearance to the sound of the explosions, everything seemed to be a perfect replay of the last loop. But after the final explosion faded, an eerie silence fell. The giant black shadow in the sky did not reappear. No chaos erupted in downtown. There were no screams of panicked civilians, no sounds of battle. Aside from the heavy fog, it was as if nothing had happened at all. The world was unnervingly quiet. This strange turn of events left everyone in the square murmuring in confusion. Is it over? That's it. The imagined catastrophe never materialized. It was like a play that had abruptly ended at its climax. Leo watched their baffled expressions with satisfaction, a faint smile on his lips. But the show wasn't over yet. Next, The sound of marching footsteps came from beyond the fog. A young officer from the city guard walked in. He surveyed the crowd and stopped in front of Fredericks. Director Fredericks, Her Highness has already evacuated the residents of downtown. The threat of the god's descent has been largely eliminated. What? Fredericks said, stunned. The second prince anticipated this. The officer nodded. Yes, sir. Please have your agents accompany us. We'll need your help in locating and disarming the remaining Ethereum crystal bombs. We require professional spellcasters. Hearing that the threat had been neutralized, most of the people present broke into expressions of joy and relief. The whole incident had been a roller coaster, but it seemed to have ended without disaster. A few, however, did not look relieved. Their expressions were dark and uncertain. And that was exactly the effect Leo wanted. The third prince, for example, was scowling, his face a thundercloud. Whether it was because his chance at glory had been stolen or for some other reason, his eyes were filled with malice. And then there was P5I by his side, the knight named Raoul. His expression was even uglier than the prince's. Leo narrowed his eyes, studying him. Raoul's face was a mask of utter despair. He clenched his fists, his head bowed as if deep in thought. Suddenly, he looked up, and his eyes met Leo's for a fleeting second. The look in them was pure venom. In an instant, he blurred into motion, darting into the thick fog. Raoul! The third prince cried out, spinning around. Where are you going? But Leo was already shouting. It's him, the mastermind. Simultaneously, the attack command locked onto its target. Helena didn't know why her brother had marked the man, but seeing the terrifying expression on his face, she didn't hesitate. 6 tentacles shot out, stabbing toward the fleeing figure. A crimson shadow flashed past as Evelyn, wielding her blood-red blade, gave chase. The sudden turn of events left everyone stunned for a moment. Only Fredericks reacted instantly. He pointed in the direction Leo and the others had disappeared and yelled, "That knight is the suspect. Get him!" At his command, all the BSI agents sprang into action. In the end, only the third prince was left standing in place, dumbfounded. He muttered to himself in disbelief, "Impossible! How could it be?" It was over.